Hey guys, it's Nemo again. Just want to say thanks for tuning in as always. Welcome back to another Wideawakehorror video. Today we've got some really good worst state horror stories. Now, I'm sure you've got crazy stories yourself, so if you feel like sharing it, hit us up on our email and send the story through, and yeah, if we like it, we'll put in one of our videos. But for now, hope you enjoy these stories.
I knew something was off before I even sat down, and I can't explain why. It wasn't anything obvious, just one of those small gut feelings you try to ignore because you don't want to be that paranoid person. I remember standing outside the bar, checking my phone like 3 times even though I knew I was early, watching people walk past like I was waiting for something bad to happen instead of just a normal date. It was one of those low light places with sticky tables and music that sounded like it was playing from another room. Not fancy, but not terrible either. Just average. I picked it because it felt safe, like nothing weird could really happen there. That was my first mistake. She walked in about 5 minutes after I got there, and honestly, she looked great. Better than her pictures. Like one of those rare times where you feel relieved instead of disappointed. She smiled right away, spotted me instantly like she already knew exactly what I looked like in person. Not in a normal way either, more like she had studied me. I brushed that off. People stalk socials all the time before dates. Normal. We sat down, ordered drinks, and the first part actually went fine. Like really fine. She was funny in a dry way, not loud or attention seeking. She kept eye contact the whole time, which I noticed because most people don't. It wasn't uncomfortable at first, just intense. She asked questions about my job, where I grew up, basic stuff, but she remembered every detail, like instantly. I mentioned something small, and 10 minutes later, she'd bring it back up exactly how I said it. I thought it was impressive. Then it got weird slowly. It started with small comments that didn't seem like much until later. Like she'd say things about how I seemed stable or how I felt like someone who doesn't run away. I laughed it off at the time because it sounded like random compliments, but thinking back, it felt more like she was checking boxes. The drinks kept coming. I wasn't even ordering that fast, but somehow my glass never stayed empty for long. She barely drank hers, just small sips, always watching me over the rim like she was measuring something. About halfway through, the conversation shifted. Not suddenly, just like it slowly drifted somewhere else and I didn't notice until I was already there. She started talking about her future. Not in a normal vague way. Not like I want kids someday or I want to travel. She got specific. Really specific. She talked about where she wanted to live, what kind of house, what color the walls would be, how many rooms. She described it like it already existed somewhere, and she'd just been there earlier that day. I nodded along, still not thinking too much about it. Then she started talking about kids. Again, not unusual at first. People bring that up sometimes. But she didn't say if or maybe. She talked like it was already decided, like it was part of a plan she had already locked in. She started listing names. Not just one or two, a whole list. And not casually either. She went into detail about why each name mattered, what kind of personality the child would have, what they'd grow up to be like. She had this whole structure in her head, like she had already mapped out entire lives for people who didn't even exist. I laughed a little, trying to keep it light, but it didn't land. She didn't laugh back. She just kept going, adding more details, like she was getting more into it the longer she talked. And that's when I started feeling that same weird thing I had outside the bar. I tried to steer the conversation somewhere else. Asked about her job again, something neutral. But she didn't really follow. She just circled back. And then she said something that actually made my stomach drop. She mentioned how the names would fit with mine. Not like a joke, not like flirting, like it was already decided that I was part of that plan. I finally pushed back a little. Not aggressively, just casually saying maybe it was a bit early to be thinking that far ahead. That's when everything changed. Her face didn't twist or anything dramatic. It was worse than that. It just stopped. Let all the expression drained out at once. Her eyes stayed locked on me, but there was nothing behind them anymore. Just this flat, empty look. She didn't say anything for a few seconds, and it felt way longer than it actually was. Then she started talking again, but slower, more controlled. She went over the names again, one by one, like she was correcting something. Like I had misunderstood, not disagreed. She explained why each one worked, why it made sense. Her voice stayed calm, but there was something underneath it that made it hard to breathe properly. I tried to laugh it off again, but it felt forced this time, like I was playing along with something I didn't understand. That's when she got annoyed. Not loud, not yelling, just a shift in tone that felt sharp. She started pointing out things about me that I had told her earlier, connecting them to her plan, saying how they matched, how it proved compatibility. It didn't feel like a conversation anymore. It felt like she was presenting evidence. I remember noticing that the music in the bar had gotten louder, or maybe I was just more aware of it. People were talking around us, glasses clinking, everything normal, but it felt far away, like we were in a separate space. I checked my phone again, thinking about leaving, but I didn't want to make it awkward, which sounds stupid now. Then she said she had already told her family about me. That didn't make sense. We had only been talking for a couple days. I asked how, and she just smiled slightly and said she had a good feeling. But it didn't sound like a feeling. It sounded like a decision. I started noticing more things after that. Small details that didn't add up. Like how she already knew what area I lived in even though I never told her exactly. Or how she mentioned a place I go to sometimes like she had been there too at the same time. I felt this pressure building, like I needed to leave but didn't know how to do it without setting something off. So I made an excuse about needing to get up early. She didn't argue. That was the weird part. She just nodded like she expected it. But then she said we continue next time. Not if, when. I paid quickly, stood up, and she stayed seated for a second longer than normal, just watching me. Then she stood up too and followed me outside. The air felt cold, even though it wasn't. We stood there for a second, and I thought she might try to hug me or something normal, but she didn't. She just looked at me again with that same focused expression. Then she said she'd text me the full list later so I could think about it properly. I nodded because I didn't know what else to do. I walked away, not even looking back, but I could feel it. That feeling of being watched. When I got home, I had 3 messages already. Not spaced out, all sent at once. It was a list. Names, dates, little notes next to each one, like a schedule. I didn't reply. About 10 minutes later, another message came through. It said she knew I needed time, but that it was important I didn't overthink it because everything already made sense. I blocked her after that. The next morning, I woke up to a missed call from a number I didn't recognize, and a voicemail. I didn't listen to it. I just deleted it and sat there for a while, thinking about how normal everything seemed at the start and how quickly it turned into something I couldn't explain. I still think about that list sometimes. Not the names themselves, just the way it was written. Like it wasn't a plan. Like it was already happening.
Hey guys, quick one. Sorry for interrupting. Just want to let you guys know that we've got a new channel coming, and it's an animated channel. Now, I hope you guys are just as excited as we are for this one, and I can't wait to share new details soon. So keep an eye out. For now, enjoy the rest of these stories.
I almost didn't go, and I wish I stuck with that. It wasn't even a big reason. Just one of those random moods where everything feels slightly off, and you can't explain why. I was already dressed, already halfway through doing my hair, and I remember just staring at myself thinking I could cancel and nothing bad would happen. He wouldn't care that much. We had only been talking for a week. But I went anyway because I didn't want to be that person who flakes last minute. We were meeting at this late-night food place that stays open way past normal hours, the kind where people go after everything else closes. It had bright lights, plastic menus, and booths that made everything echo slightly. Not romantic at all, but he picked it because he said he liked low-pressure first dates. When I got there, he was already sitting down, which surprised me because he didn't seem like the early type. He noticed me instantly, like he had been watching the door the whole time. Not in a bad way at first, just alert. He stood up, smiled, and everything felt normal. Honestly, better than normal. He looked exactly like his pictures, maybe even a bit better. He had this calm energy that made it easy to relax. Not awkward, not overly confident, just steady. We ordered food, got drinks, and started talking like we already knew each other. The first part of the night was actually really good. He was funny in a quiet way, like he'd say something slightly off and then just look at you when you figured it out. He asked about my job, my friends, where I grew up, all the usual stuff, but he actually listened. like really listened. He didn't interrupt or rush to talk about himself. I remember thinking this was probably one of the easiest first dates I've been on. There was one thing I noticed, though. He knew small details about things I hadn't told him directly. Like I mentioned once earlier in the week that I liked a certain type of food, and he remembered it exactly, even though it was buried in a random message. Or he brought up a place near where I live that I never told him about, just kind of hinted at. I figured maybe I forgot mentioning it. That happens. The food came, we kept talking, and time moved faster than I expected. I stopped checking my phone. I stopped thinking about leaving early. And then it shifted. Not suddenly. More like he just changed topic in a way that felt casual at first. He started talking about past relationships. Again, normal. Everyone does that at some point. He said his last relationship ended badly, but he laughed when he said it. Not like it hurt him, more like it was a story he had told a lot. I asked a bit about it, expecting something basic. Maybe they argued too much. Maybe they wanted different things. He leaned back slightly and started explaining. At first, it sounded like he was just really into her. Like maybe too invested, but still within normal range. He said he liked knowing what she was doing, where she was, just because he cared. I didn't think much of it. Then he kept going. He mentioned how he used to show up at places she didn't tell him about, just to surprise her. He said it like it was thoughtful, like it proved how much effort he put in. I felt this small pause in my head, like something didn't line up. But I didn't interrupt. I just let him keep talking. He started smiling more as he went on, like he was remembering something fun. He talked about figuring out her schedule without her telling him. Said it wasn't hard if you just paid attention. He listed things like patterns, habits, little clues from things she posted or said once and forgot about. And then he laughed. Not nervous, not embarrassed. Just a normal laugh, like he had just told a funny story. That's when it hit me properly. He wasn't describing a relationship. He was describing tracking someone. I remember just sitting there, holding my drink, not really processing what to say next. Everything around us felt louder again, like I was suddenly aware of every other person in the place. I tried to brush it off at first, thinking maybe he was exaggerating. But then he added more. He said she eventually got uncomfortable with it, which he said like it was unreasonable, like she overreacted. He explained how she accused him of stalking her, and he laughed again at that word. He actually said it was kind of true, but in a harmless way. That part stuck with me. Harmless. Like following someone around without them knowing could be harmless. I didn't laugh. I couldn't. I tried to keep my face neutral, but inside everything was starting to feel wrong. Not in a dramatic way, just this slow realization that person sitting across from me wasn't what I thought. He didn't notice. Or maybe he did and didn't care. He kept going, explaining how he used to wait outside places just to catch a glimpse of her leaving. How he once followed her home from work without her knowing, just to make sure she got back safe. He said it like he was proud of it. Like it showed dedication. I started thinking back to earlier in the night, the way he noticed me instantly when I walked in. How he remembered everything. How he seemed to already know things I didn't tell him. It all started connecting in a way I didn't like. I asked carefully if he ever thought that might be too much. He shrugged it off completely. He said people just don't understand what real attention looks like anymore. That was the moment I knew I needed to leave. But I didn't get up right away. I don't know why. Maybe because he still looked normal. He wasn't acting aggressive or angry. He was calm, smiling, eating like nothing was wrong. It made it harder to react. I checked my phone, pretending to read something important, trying to think of an excuse that wouldn't set anything off. That's when he mentioned something else. He said he got better at it over time. Better. Like it was a skill. He explained how he learned to be more subtle, how to avoid being noticed, how to time things so it didn't look obvious. He said all of that in the same tone someone would use to talk about getting better at a hobby. I felt cold at that point. I made an excuse about needing to leave early to something about work the next morning. He didn't argue. But he watched me closely. Not suspicious, just focused. He nodded and said it was fine, but the way he said it felt like he was already thinking ahead, like he was planning something else. We walked out together, and I noticed he stayed slightly behind me the whole time. Not beside me, not ahead. Behind. I could feel it without turning around. When we got outside, he stopped and just looked at me again with that same calm expression he had all night. He said he'd text me when I got home to make sure I was safe. I nodded because I didn't want to escalate anything. Then I left. I didn't look back until I got to the corner, and when I did, he was still standing there, watching. I got home, locked the door, and blocked his number immediately. About 20 minutes later, I got a message from an unknown number. It just said that blocking him wasn't necessary, and that he already knew I got home safely. I sat there staring at that message for a long time, trying to figure out how he could possibly know that. I hadn't posted anything. I hadn't told him exactly where I live. I still don't know how he knew. I didn't reply. I just turned off my phone and left it in another room. I didn't sleep much that night. And for the next few days, I kept noticing things that made me feel like I wasn't alone even when I was. Nothing obvious. Just small things. Like someone paying attention. I knew something was wrong the moment she asked for the first photo, and not in a big dramatic way, just in that small, annoying way where you think, all right, this might be one of those nights. It was supposed to be simple. We agreed to meet at this rooftop cinema thing that only runs on weekends. You sit on these beanbags, watch some random movie, and there's a bar at the side. It sounded chill, not too intense for a first date, and honestly I picked it because it gave us something to focus on if conversation got awkward. I got there early again, which is becoming a pattern I probably need to fix. The place was already half full. People setting up blankets, ordering drinks, that kind of vibe. City lights in the background, music playing low, nothing weird. She showed up right on time. First impression, she looked good, like put together but not over the top. She smiled straight away and came over like she already knew exactly where I was sitting, which I didn't think about at the time. Before she even fully sat down, she pulled out her phone. First selfie. I leaned in because it felt automatic, like that's just what you do. She snapped it, checked it, then took another one immediately. I didn't think much of it. People take pictures. Normal. We started talking, and it was fine. Actually pretty good. She was talkative, kind of energetic, jumping between topics fast, but still easy to follow. She asked a lot of questions, laughed a lot, and kept things moving so there wasn't really any silence. But every few minutes, the phone came back out. Another selfie. Sometimes just her, sometimes both of us. She'd adjust the angle, fix her hair, take 2 or 3 shots before putting the phone down again. At first I thought she just wanted a good one, but it kept happening. Again and then again. I started noticing how often it was, like every 5 minutes, sometimes less. The movie started playing, but we barely watched it. She kept talking, pointing things out, making comments, then suddenly grabbing her phone again like she remembered something important. Another photo. I joked about it at one point just lightly, saying she must be building a whole album from one night. She laughed it off, nodded, didn't really explain. I let it go. But then it got weirder. She started holding the phone slightly differently. Not just snapping quick photos, but keeping it up a bit longer. Angled slightly away, like she was making sure something stayed in frame. I noticed it, but didn't connect it to anything yet. We got drinks, came back, sat down again, same pattern. Talk, laugh, phone, photo. At one point, she asked me to lean closer, like really close, almost shoulder to shoulder. She took a picture, checked it, then didn't put the phone down right away. She kept it there, for a few extra seconds, smiling at it, not at me. Then she lowered it like nothing happened. That's when I started feeling that weird pressure again, like something small wasn't right, but I couldn't place it. I tried to focus on the movie for a bit, but she kept pulling me back into conversation. Asking random questions, some normal, some oddly specific. Like what I'd do if I suddenly became popular online, or if I'd ever been recognized in public. I thought it was just random talk. I answered casually. She nodded a lot, like she was collecting answers. Then she got up to grab more drinks and left her phone on the beanbag. I didn't even look at it. I really didn't. But it lit up. Just a notification at first. Then another. And another. They stacked quickly like messages coming in fast. I glanced over without thinking, and what I saw didn't make sense at first. It looked like a chat, a lot of usernames, comments moving up the screen. I leaned a bit closer, and then it clicked. It wasn't messages to her. It was a live chat, like a stream. I picked up the phone without thinking, just to check properly, and there it was. A live video. The camera angle matched exactly where we were sitting. Me, her, the rooftop, everything. The title at the top said something about a first date. There were thousands of viewers. I froze for a second, just staring at it. The comments were moving so fast I could barely read them, but I caught enough. People talking about me. About how I looked, how I acted, what I was saying. Some of them were making jokes, some were guessing things about me, some were telling her what to ask next. My stomach dropped. She came back right then. I put the phone down instantly, but it was too late. She saw my face. She knew. She sat down slowly, picked up the phone, checked it, then looked at me with this calm expression like nothing had changed. I didn't know what to say. My head felt weird, like everything just shifted too fast. I asked her what that was, trying to keep my voice normal. She didn't panic. She didn't even look guilty. She just smiled slightly and explained it like it was nothing. Like it was obvious. She said she streams parts of her life sometimes, and first dates get the most attention. Attention. Like this was just content. I asked why she didn't tell me. She shrugged. Said people act differently when they know they're being watched. That answer made it worse. Way worse. I started replaying the entire night in my head. Everything I said, everything I did, all of it just out there for random people. I asked how long it had been going on. She checked her phone casually and said pretty much since she arrived. So the whole time. Everything. I felt this mix of anger and something else I can't really explain, like embarrassment, but heavier. She turned the phone slightly toward me, like she wanted to show me. The viewer count had gone up. Comments were reacting to me realizing it. People were literally watching me find out. That part stuck with me the most. I stood up. I didn't even care how it looked. She stayed seated for a second, still holding the phone, still streaming. Then she stood up too, following me. Not rushing, just calm. I could feel eyes on me even though I knew it was just a phone. We walked toward the exit, and she kept the phone angled toward us the whole time, like she didn't want to miss anything. I told her to turn it off. She hesitated, just for a second. Then she did it. The screen went dark, but it didn't make it feel better. The damage was already done. Outside, the air felt completely different, like everything was too quiet after all that noise. She started explaining again, saying it wasn't a big deal, that no one there actually knew me, that it was all anonymous. But it didn't feel anonymous. It felt like thousands of people had been sitting right there with us the whole time. Watching. Judging. Saving it, maybe. I left without saying much else. Just walked away. She didn't follow this time. Later that night, I got messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Just short ones. Things about the date. Things I had said. One even mentioned the exact drink I've ordered. I realized then that someone must have clipped it, shared it somewhere else. It wasn't just live. It was permanent. I deleted everything, blocked what I could, but it didn't matter. Once something like that is out there, it's not really gone. I still think about how normal it all felt at the start. Just a regular night, regular conversation. And the whole time, I wasn't just on a date. I was being watched. I should have left when he didn't even look at the menu. That's the part I keep replaying, not the ending, not the worst part, just that small moment at the start that didn't sit right, and I ignored anyway. It was so quick, like nothing, but it set the tone for everything that came after. The place he picked was way nicer than anywhere I would have chosen for a first date. Like one of those dim restaurants where everything looks expensive even if you don't know the prices. Soft lighting, quiet music, people talking low like they don't want to be heard. I almost turned around when I saw it because it felt like too much, but he was already inside waiting. He stood up when I walked in, smiled, pulled my chair out, all of that. Very put together, very controlled. Not in a bad way at first, just polish. We sat down, and the waiter handed us menus. I opened mine right away, mostly just to have something to look at while settling in. He didn't. He didn't even touch his. Instead, he leaned back slightly, like he already knew everything on it, and started talking like the menu didn't matter at all. I remember thinking maybe he had been there a lot. Maybe he had a favorite dish. That would have made sense. But then the waiter came back, and before I even had time to say anything, he ordered. For both of us. Just like that. No pause, no checking with me, no asking what I wanted or if I had any preferences. He said it smoothly, confidently, like it was completely normal. The waiter nodded and walked away. I just sat there for a second, still holding the menu, not even sure what to say. I laughed it off at first, kind of joking about it, but he didn't laugh the same way. He just smiled like he had done something right. He said he picked something good, something I'd like. I didn't want to make it a big deal, so I let it go. That was my second mistake. We started talking, and honestly, he was easy to talk to. He had this calm, steady way of speaking, like he never rushed anything. He asked about my job, my hobbies, all the usual stuff, but there was something about how he listened that felt a bit off. Not bad exactly, just focused. Like he was paying attention in a way that felt more intense than normal. Every time I answered something, he'd nod slowly, like he was confirming something in his head. I noticed it, but again, I ignored it. The food came faster than I expected. The plates looked good, really good actually, like something you take a picture of before eating, the kind of place where everything is arranged perfectly. He looked satisfied immediately, like he had been waiting for that exact moment. I looked at the plate, and that's when everything dropped. I saw it right away. One of the main ingredients. The one thing I can't eat. Not something minor either, not something I could just pick out and be fine. The kind of allergy that actually matters, the kind where you don't risk it. My stomach sank. I looked back at him, hoping maybe I was wrong, but he was already starting to eat, watching me expectantly. I told him. Try to keep it casual, like it wasn't a big deal, just explaining that I couldn't eat that specific thing. His reaction wasn't what I expected. He didn't apologize. He didn't look surprised. He just stopped chewing for a second and looked at me like I had said something inconvenient. Not wrong. Inconvenient. He asked why. I explained it again, still trying to keep it light. He leaned back slightly, staring at the plate, then back at me. His expression changed, not dramatically, just enough to notice. Like something didn't go according to plan. He said it should be fine. That maybe I was overreacting. That it didn't look like there was that much of it anyway. That part made me uncomfortable fast. I told him I couldn't risk it. That it wasn't worth it. He sighed, not loud, but enough for me to hear it clearly. Then he said he went out of his way to pick something good. Like I had somehow ruined that. I felt this pressure building, like the situation was turning into something bigger than it needed to be. I offered to just order something else. Simple solution. But he didn't like that. He said it would be a waste. That the food was already there. That I should at least try it. That's when it started feeling wrong. Not just awkward, but wrong. He kept pushing calmly, not raising his voice, but not backing off either. He started pointing out parts of the dish, saying which bits might be safe, which ones probably didn't have the ingredient. Like he had already decided that I was going to eat it. I kept saying no. He kept insisting. People around us were just eating, talking completely normal, and it made everything feel even more off because no one else noticed anything. It was just us. This quiet tension over a plate of food. I tried to change the subject, but he kept bringing it back. Every time. He'd take a bite, then look at me like he was waiting. Waiting for me to give in. I started feeling trapped in a way I didn't expect. Like something so small had turned into this weird test. And I was failing it by not eating. He asked if I didn't trust him. That question stuck with me, because it didn't make sense. It wasn't about trust. It was about something real, something physical, something I couldn't just ignore. But the way he said it made it feel like I was the problem. Like I was being difficult. I pushed my chair back slightly, just to create a bit of space. That's when he got visibly irritated. Not loud, not aggressive in a way that would draw attention, but enough to make it clear. His jaw tightened. His tone shifted. He said I was making it into something bigger than it was. That people have allergies all the time and still eat things carefully. That I should just pick around it. I felt this wave of frustration and something else, something closer to unease. Because it didn't feel like he didn't understand. It felt like he didn't care. Like the fact that I couldn't eat it didn't fit into whatever idea he had for the night. I told him again I wasn't eating it. This time more firmly. He didn't respond right away. He just stared at me for a few seconds, then went back to eating his food like nothing happened. But the mood was completely different now. Heavy, quiet, uncomfortable. I sat there, not touching the plate, just waiting for a moment where I could leave without making it worse. Time moved slower after that. He barely talked, just ate, occasionally glancing at me in a way that made it clear he was still annoyed, like I had disappointed him. Eventually, I said I needed to go. He nodded but didn't look surprised, like he expected it. We left the restaurant, and the whole walk outside felt tense, like there was still something unsaid hanging there. He didn't try to stop me, didn't try to fix it. Just said something about how next time I should mention things like that earlier, like it was my fault. I went home feeling weird, not just upset but unsettled in a way I couldn't fully explain. Later that night, I thought about it more. About how he didn't check the menu. How he didn't ask. How he didn't care when I told him. And the part that stuck with me the most was how calm he stayed the whole time. Like none of it was unusual to him. Like this was just how things were supposed to go. I blocked him after that. I didn't want to see if there would be a next time. I didn't realize I had been sitting there alone for almost an hour until the waiter asked if I wanted anything else, and by that point it already felt too late to leave without it looking weird. The night started normal enough. Not amazing, not terrible, just one of those dates where you're still figuring out if you even like the person. We met this small restaurant tucked between a laundrette and a closed shop with metal shutters. The kind of place you wouldn't notice unless you were looking for it. Inside it was warm, a bit cramped, tables close together so you could hear parts of other people's conversations without trying. Not fancy at all, but it had that busy energy that makes it feel alive. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, scrolling on her phone. She looked up right away when I walked in, like she had been waiting specifically for me and not just checking the door every few seconds. She smiled, waved slightly, and put her phone down like it didn't matter anymore. First impression, she seemed normal. Maybe a bit distracted, but not in a bad way. More like she had a lot going on. We started talking, ordered drinks, and it flowed okay. Not the best conversation I've ever had, but easy enough. She talked about her job, complained about her boss a bit, told a couple of stories that sounded slightly exaggerated but still believable. I remember noticing that she checked her phone a lot. Not constantly, but enough to stand out. Like every few minutes, a quick glance, sometimes typing something fast, then back to me like nothing happened. I didn't think much of it at first. People do that. The food came, and she barely touched it. She kept talking though, jumping between topics, asking me questions, but not always waiting for full answers. It felt a bit scattered, like her attention wasn't fully there. Still, nothing that made me want to leave. About halfway through, she suddenly stopped mid-conversation, looked at her phone again, and her expression changed slightly. Not panic, not worry, just a shift. She said she needed to go to the bathroom. Just like that. She stood up quickly, grabbed her bag, and walked off without waiting. I nodded, didn't think anything of it. People do that too. I sat there, took a sip of my drink, looked around the place. Same noise, same conversations, everything normal. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. I checked my phone, scrolled a bit, not concerned yet. 15 minutes. I started noticing. 20 minutes. I looked toward the back where the bathrooms were, expecting to see her coming back any second. Nothing. I told myself maybe there was a line. Maybe she ran into someone she knew. Maybe she was on a call. I kept making small excuses in my head because the alternative felt awkward. 30 minutes. The waiter came by, asked if everything was all right. I said yeah, just waiting for my date. He nodded, but I could tell he had already noticed. I checked my phone again. No messages. No missed calls. Nothing. I thought about texting her, but it felt strange to message someone who was technically still there. So I waited a bit longer. 40 minutes. The food on her plate was cold by then, untouched except for a couple of bites. Her drink was still half full. Everything about it looked like she was coming back, but she wasn't. I finally stood up and walked toward the bathroom area, trying not to make it obvious. I checked the door, waited a second, listened. Nothing. No movement, no sound. I stepped back, feeling that weird mix of confusion and embarrassment building. I went back to the table, sat down again, not sure what to do next. Leaving felt awkward. Staying felt worse. That's when I noticed her bag wasn't there anymore. I hadn't seen her take it, but it was gone. That hit me properly. She wasn't in the bathroom. She had left. Just walked out. I sat there for another minute, just processing it. Trying to figure out if I missed something. If I said something wrong. If there was any sign this was going to happen. I couldn't think of anything. It just didn't make sense. Eventually, I asked for the bill. It wasn't cheap either. Not ridiculous, but enough to make it sting more considering the situation. I paid, left, and stepped outside feeling more confused than anything else. Not even angry yet. Just confused. I walked a bit, checked my phone again. Still nothing. No explanation, no message, nothing to acknowledge what just happened. I started heading home, replaying the night in my head, trying to find the moment where it went wrong. But it all felt normal. That's what made it worse. It didn't feel like a bad date. It just stopped. About 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Her name popped up. I stopped walking immediately and opened the message. It wasn't what I expected. No apology. No explanation. Just a short message saying she had to leave suddenly and asking if I could send money for her taxi. I stared at it for a second, not even sure I was reading it right. I read it again. Same thing. She left without saying anything, didn't come back, and now wanted me to pay for her ride home. I felt this weird shift from confusion to something heavier. Not just annoyed. Unsettled. Because it didn't feel like a normal thing to ask. It felt planned. Like the whole thing had been leading to that moment. I looked back at the restaurant in the distance, thinking about how long I sat there, how she kept checking her phone, how she barely touched her food. It started to click in a way I didn't like. I didn't reply. I put my phone back in my pocket and kept walking. A minute later, another message came through. This one slightly longer, saying she didn't have enough money on her and that it would really help. No mention of the date. No mention of leaving. Just the request. I kept walking. Then another message. This one with a number. The amount for the taxi. Specific. Like it had already been calculated. That part made it feel even worse. I realized then that she probably wasn't even in a taxi when she first messaged. She was just asking. Seeing if I'd do it. I stopped again, took my phone out, and blocked her. No response. No argument. Just done. I stood there for a second longer, looking at the last message before it disappeared. Then I put my phone away and went home. Later that night, I kept thinking about how easily it all happened. How normal it felt right up until it didn't. And how I sat there waiting, thinking she'd come back, while she was already gone. I knew her name before I even knew what his job was, and that should have been enough for me to leave right there. It wasn't like he introduced her or anything normal like that. It just slipped out early like part of his default settings. We had barely sat down, hadn't even ordered drinks yet, and somehow she was already in the conversation like a third person at the table. The place we met was this old arcade that had been turned into a bar. Flashing lights everywhere, machines lining the walls, people half playing games and half drinking. It was loud, but in a fun way, like you didn't have to force conversation because there was always something happening around you. I thought it was a good choice. Less pressure, more distraction. He was already inside when I got there, standing near one of the machines, tapping buttons like he wasn't actually playing. He looked normal, relaxed, gave me a quick smile, and a wave like everything was fine. We grabbed drinks and sat at one of the small tables near the back, away from most of the noise. Things started okay. He asked the usual questions, where I was from, what I do, all that. I answered, asked him stuff back, trying to keep it balanced. But every time the conversation got even slightly personal, he brought her up. Not directly at first. Just small mentions. Like comparing something I said to something she used to do. Or referencing a story that didn't make sense without context. Then adding that it was about his ex. I remember thinking it was a bit much, but some people just do that when things are recent. I tried to steer away from it, changed topics, asked about his hobbies, things like that. But it kept circling back, every time. It was like everything connected to her somehow. After a while, he stopped easing into it and just started talking about her directly. Longer stories, more details. He described her like he had studied her, like he could map out every habit, every reaction. The way he talked about it didn't sound emotional, though. It sounded analytical, like he was explaining a system. He kept calling her crazy, over and over, saying she overreacted, that she made things difficult, as she didn't understand him. I nodded along at first, not really agreeing but not pushing back either. But the more he talked, the less it added up. The stories didn't match the label he kept using. He described something she did, and it would sound like a normal reaction to something not normal. Like she was responding to him, not just acting randomly. I started noticing how he framed everything. He was always calm in the stories. Always reasonable. Always the one trying to fix things. And she was always a problem. They felt too clean. Too one-sided. I didn't say that out loud, but I felt it. The night kept going, and at some point I realized I had barely learned anything new about him that didn't involve her. It was like his whole identity was built around that relationship ending. We got another round of drinks, and he leaned back, getting more comfortable, more open. That's when the details got more specific. He started talking about arguments they had, things she accused him of, things he said she misunderstood. He laughed at parts that didn't sound funny. Like moments that felt tense were serious, he treated them like jokes. That made it worse. I remember looking around at the arcade lights, trying to ground myself a bit, because the conversation felt heavy in a place that was supposed to be light. Then it happened the first time. He said her name, but not in a story. He said it like he was talking to me. It was quick. Just slipped out mid-sentence. I paused, thinking maybe I misheard. But he didn't react at first. He just kept going like nothing happened. Then he noticed my face. He stopped, blinked, then gave this small laugh like it was no big deal. Said it was just a habit. That it didn't mean anything. I nodded, but it didn't feel small. It felt like something underneath everything else we had been talking about. Like proof that she wasn't just a past thing. She was still right there in his head. I tried to move past it. Told myself it happens. People mix up names sometimes. But the vibe changed after that. I started paying more attention to how he looked at me. And it didn't feel like he was seeing me properly. It felt like he was comparing. Like he was checking if I matched something. He kept bringing her up again, almost immediately after, like nothing had changed. But now it felt different. Before, it was annoying. Now it felt off. Like I was sitting across from someone who wasn't fully present. The second time happened later. We had moved to a different part of the arcade, standing near one of the older machines, the kind with the faded screens and worn buttons. He was telling another story, something about how things ended between them. And then he said her name again. Clear. Direct. Not even quick this time. Just wrong. He stopped immediately after, like he realized it faster this time. But instead of brushing it off casually, he looked at me longer. Like he was checking something. Like he was trying to see if I reacted the same way she would have. That's what it felt like. Not like a mistake. Like a test. I felt this cold realization settled in. That this wasn't just about him not being over her. It was deeper than that. He wasn't just talking about her. He was still in it. Mentally. Like the relationship never actually ended for him. Like he was replaying it. And now I was just there. Filling a space. I stepped back slightly, creating a bit of distance. He noticed. Of course he noticed. He always noticed. He asked if everything was okay, but the way he asked didn't feel concerned. It felt calculated. Like he was watching for a specific answer. I said I was fine, just tired. I needed an exit. He nodded slowly, like he didn't fully believe me, but accepted it anyway. We walked toward the exit, and I could feel that same pressure building again. Like something wasn't finished. Like he wasn't done. Outside, the air felt colder, quieter, like stepping out of a different world. He stood there for a second, looking at me, and I could tell he was thinking. Then he said something about how I reminded him of her. Not exactly the same, but similar. That was enough. I didn't argue. Didn't ask what he meant. I just nodded, said I had to go, and walked away. He didn't follow, but I could feel his eyes on me until I turned the corner. Later that night, I thought about the way he said her name. Both times. How natural it sounded. How easy it was for him. And how it didn't feel like he mixed us up. It felt like he never separated us in the first place. I knew something was wrong when she waved at me, and there were two people waving back. For a second, I actually thought I walked up to the wrong table. I even slowed down a bit, checked her face again, made sure it matched the photos, because my brain was trying to find a normal explanation for why she wasn't alone. But it was her. Same smile, same jacket she mentioned earlier, same everything. Just with someone else sitting next to her. I walked over anyway because at that point turning around would have been even more awkward. She greeted me like nothing was unusual, like this was exactly how the night was supposed to go. Then she introduced the other girl casually, saying she came along for safety. That word stuck out immediately. Safety. I nodded, said it was fine, even though it wasn't really fine, just unexpected. We were at this small board game cafe, which I thought would be a good idea because it gives you something to do if conversation gets weird. Shelves full of games, people laughing, rolling dice, that kind of place. I sat down across from them, already feeling like I was outnumbered. Her friend didn't smile the same way she did. She looked at me like she was trying to figure something out before I even spoke. Not rude exactly, just focused. We started talking, but it didn't feel like a normal date from the start. It felt like I had walked into something pre-planned. Her friend asked the first question. Simple at first. What I do for work. Where I grew up. Basic stuff. I answered, trying to keep it casual, but she didn't react like most people do. No small comments, no back and forth. Just a nod, then another question. Right away. No pause. It felt structured. Like she had a list in her head. The girl I was actually there to see tried to keep things light, laughed a bit, added small comments, but every time the conversation started to feel normal, her friend pulled it back. Another question. More specific this time. About my job, but deeper. About how long I'd been there, why I chose it, what my long-term plans were. I answered again, starting to feel the pressure build. Not enough to leave yet, but enough to notice. I try asking her friend something back, just to balance it out. She answered, but briefly, then redirected back to me almost instantly. It wasn't a conversation. It was one-sided, like I was the topic. We picked a game to play, something simple, but even that didn't help. She barely focused on it. Her friend definitely didn't. Every move I made, every small thing I said, it felt like it was being watched, analyzed. I started noticing how her friend would glance at her after I answered something, like they were communicating without speaking. Small looks. Tiny nods. It made me feel like I was missing part of the conversation. Like something was happening just out of reach. Then the questions got more personal. Not inappropriate, just direct. About past relationships. About how they ended. About what I would do in certain situations. It didn't feel natural. It felt like a test. And the worst part was how calm her friend stayed the whole time. No jokes, no real emotion, just this steady tone that didn't change. Like she was collecting information. I started getting answers wrong. Not factually wrong, but wrong in the way she reacted. Like she didn't like what I said. I could tell by the way she paused slightly longer before the next question. Or the way she looked at her friend afterward. The girl I was actually on the date with kept smiling, but it felt forced at times, like she was caught between two roles. Sometimes she'd try to steer things back to normal, ask me something casual, laugh at something small. But it never lasted. Her friend would jump back in. At one point, I noticed her phone was on the table, screen facing up. It lit up with a message. Just briefly. But I caught enough. It was from the girl sitting next to her. Even though they were right there together. I didn't see the full message, but I saw my name. That made my stomach drop a bit. They weren't just talking silently with looks. They were messaging each other. About me. While I was sitting right there. After that, everything felt more intense. Every question felt heavier. Like it wasn't just being asked, it was being recorded somewhere. Judged. Scored. I started thinking about leaving, but I didn't want to make it weird or seem defensive, which sounds stupid now. I should have just left. Instead, I stayed, kept answering, kept trying to act normal. But inside, it felt off. Like I wasn't on a date. Like I was being evaluated for something I didn't even agree to. At some point, her friend leaned back slightly and just watched me without asking anything. That was worse. The silence made everything louder. I said something random, trying to fill it, but it didn't land. She just kept looking at me. Then she nodded once, like she had reached some kind of conclusion. After that, the energy shifted. The questions stopped. But it didn't go back to normal. It just became quiet. Awkward in a different way. The girl I came to see seemed more relaxed suddenly, like some phase had ended. She talked more, laughed more naturally, but it felt too late. Like the real part of the night had already happened. And I wasn't part of the decision. We wrapped things up not long after. No one said anything directly, no clear ending, just that mutual understanding that it was done. We stood up, said quick goodbyes, and they left together. I watched them walk away, talking to each other immediately, heads close, like I wasn't even there 5 seconds ago. I went home feeling drained more than anything. Not angry, not upset, just drained. Like I had been through something that took more energy than it should have. Later that night, I got a message from her. Short, polite, saying she didn't think it was a match. No explanation. No details. Just that. I stared at it for a while and put my phone down. What stuck with me wasn't the rejection. It was the way the whole night felt set up from the start. Like I wasn't there to meet someone. I was there to be reviewed. And whatever they were looking for, they decided I didn't have it. I could smell it before I even saw him properly. And that's how I knew the night was already done before it even started. It wasn't subtle either. Not like someone who had one drink to calm nerves. It was strong, like it had been building for hours. I remember slowing down as I walked toward the table, trying to convince myself maybe it was just the bar, maybe it was someone else nearby. But then he stood up, and it was definitely him. He smiled like everything was normal, like this was a completely fine way to show up to a first date. His movements were just slightly off, not falling over or anything obvious, just that loose, delayed kind of motion that makes you notice. I almost turned around right there. I actually thought about it for a second, but he had already seen me. So I sat down. The place we picked was this mid-range restaurant, not fancy but not casual either. Dim lights, wooden tables, people having quiet conversations, the kind of place where everyone keeps their voice down without thinking about it. Or at least they're supposed to. He sat across from me, leaning back too far in his chair, smiling like he had been waiting forever. He started talking immediately. Not even a hello that felt normal, just straight into a story about how his day went, but it didn't really make sense. Parts were missing. Details didn't connect, and he kept jumping between points like he couldn't hold on to one thought long enough. I nodded along, trying to follow, but it was hard. The waiter came over, and that's when it got worse. He interrupted him before he'd even finished speaking. Loudly. Not just louder than normal, but loud enough that people at nearby tables looked over. He started asking questions about the menu, but not in a normal way. More like he was challenging it. Asking where the ingredients came from, how they were sourced, who decided the pricing. At first, it sounded like he was just being picky. But then he took it somewhere else. He started talking about how restaurants hide things. How they don't tell customers the truth. How there are systems behind everything that people don't question. The waiter tried to respond calmly, just doing his job, but it didn't matter. He kept going, his voice getting louder. People definitely noticed now. I could feel it without even looking. He started bringing up random things that didn't connect to food at all. Talking about control, about information being filtered, about how everything is designed to keep people distracted. It wasn't just a rant. It felt like something he believed fully. Like this wasn't new for him. The waiter looked uncomfortable, glancing at me like he didn't know what to do. I felt embarrassed sitting there, like somehow I was part of it. I tried to calm things down, said we just needed a minute to look at the menu. The waiter nodded and walked away quickly. I turned back to him, hoping he'd realize how it looked. He didn't. He leaned forward slightly and kept talking, but now it was directed at me. Same topics. Same intensity. He talked about how most people don't see what's really happening. How everything is connected in ways we don't understand. His eyes were focused, but not in a calm way. More like locked in. I tried to respond normally, keep things grounded, but every answer I gave seemed to push him further. Like he was testing how much I agreed, or how much I knew. I started noticing small things. Like how he kept glancing around the room, not casually, but like he was checking something. Or how he lowered his voice suddenly at certain points, like he thought someone might hear. Then he'd go right back to being loud again. It didn't make sense. The waiter came back to take our order, and it happened again. He didn't just order. He questioned everything. Why certain dishes existed, why others didn't, why things were priced the way they were. Then he shifted back into those same ideas. Talking about hidden systems, about manipulation, about how even something as simple as a menu is part of a bigger structure. This time, it turned into an argument. Not a calm discussion. An actual argument. His voice got louder, sharper. The waiter stayed polite, but you could see the tension building. People around us stopped, pretending not to listen. It felt like a whole room was aware now. I just sat there, wishing I could disappear. He wasn't aggressive in a physical way, but the intensity was enough. It felt unpredictable. Like I didn't know what he'd say next or how far he'd take it. Eventually, the manager came over. That's when it hit me how bad it had gotten. The conversation shifted slightly, more controlled, but still tense. He backed down just enough to avoid being kicked out, but not enough to make it normal again. We ordered something simple after that, just to end it. But the damage was already done. The rest of the night felt off. He kept talking, but now it was quieter, like he was holding something back. That made it worse. Because the intensity was still there, just under the surface. He went back to those same topics again, just not as loud. Talking about people being watched, about patterns, about how certain things aren't coincidences. I stopped responding as much. Just nodded, gave short answers, waiting for a moment to leave. The food came, but I barely touched it. He ate a bit, but not much either. He seemed more focused on talking than anything else. Time moved slow after that. Every minute felt longer. I kept checking my phone, pretending I had something important to look at. Finally, I said I needed to go. He looked at me for a second, like he was deciding something. Then he nodded. No argument. No attempt to stop me. That should have made it easier. But it didn't. We walked out together, and the air outside felt different, like stepping out of something heavy. He stood there looking at me again, and for a second, he seemed almost normal. Like the whole thing inside didn't happen. But then he said something about how most people aren't ready to hear the truth. And it was right back. I left after that. Didn't wait. Didn't look back. Later that night, I kept thinking about how it started. How I smelled it before I saw him. How I knew something was wrong immediately, and still sat down anyway. I didn't think my life was interesting enough for someone to research, which is why it didn't even cross my mind that someone would. Like I'm not famous, not important, nothing special. Just a normal person with normal stuff online. So when she said she had looked me up before the date, I didn't react at first. I actually thought it was kind of funny. That changed really fast. We met at this quiet cafe that doubles as a bookstore, the kind of place where people sit for hours pretending to read while actually just scrolling on their phones. Soft lighting, shelves everywhere, barely any noise except the occasional coffee machine. It felt safe. That's the word I'd use for it. Safe enough that nothing weird should happen there. She was already sitting at a table near the back, a book open in front of her like she was trying to match the vibe of the place. She looked up when I walked in, smiled, closed the book immediately like she hadn't really been reading it. First impression, she seemed calm. Not overly talkative, not quiet either, just balanced. We got drinks, sat down, and started talking like normal. It actually went well at first. She asked good questions, listened properly, didn't interrupt. The kind of conversation that feels easy without trying too hard. I remember thinking this might actually be one of the better dates I've had. Then she said it, just casually in the middle of talking about something random. She mentioned that she had Googled me before meeting. She said it like it was completely normal, like checking the weather. I laughed a bit, said something about hoping she didn't find anything embarrassing. She smiled, nodded, and said there wasn't much. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. She kept going. She mentioned the area where I live. Not just the general area, the exact street. I paused for a second, trying to figure out if I had told her that before. I hadn't. I'm sure I hadn't. I said something about it, trying to keep it light, but my tone probably shifted without me realizing. She just shrugged slightly, like it wasn't a big deal. Then she mentioned my mom. Not just that I have one. Her name. Full name. I felt something drop in my stomach right then. That wasn't normal. That wasn't casual searching. I asked how she found that, trying to sound calm, but it didn't come out that way. She said it wasn't hard if you know where to look. That answer didn't help. It made it worse. I started replaying everything I had ever posted online in my head, trying to figure out how much was actually out there. She kept talking, like nothing was wrong. She brought up the school I went to. Not the general area, the exact one. Even mentioned something about a photo from years ago that I barely remember posting. That's when it stopped feeling like a date. It felt I was sitting across from someone who had already been through my life before I even met her. I tried to laugh it off again, but it didn't work this time. My voice sounded off even to me. She noticed. Of course she noticed. She tilted her head slightly, like she was studying my reaction. Then she said something about how it's good to know who you're meeting. That part sounded reasonable on the surface. But the way she said it didn't feel normal. It felt like she had gone further than she should have. And she knew it. I asked how long she spent looking me up. She thought about it for a second, like she was calculating, and gave a vague answer. Not specific. Just enough to avoid saying too much. I didn't like that. I started noticing small things after that. Like how she already knew answers to questions she was asking. She'd ask something, then nod before I even finished responding. Like she was confirming information instead of learning it. It made every question feel pointless. Like I wasn't telling her anything new. I was just repeating things she already found. I tried to shift the conversation to something else, something neutral. But it didn't help. Everything circled back. She kept dropping small details. Little things about my past that I hadn't mentioned. Each one hitting slightly harder than the last. Not big enough to confront directly, but enough to build this constant pressure. I started feeling exposed in a way I didn't expect. Like parts of my life that should have stayed separate were suddenly all in one place. Laid out. Organized. She asked about my family again, and when I answered, she added something small. Just a detail. But it proved she already knew. That's when I stopped answering properly. Just gave short responses, trying to close things off. She noticed that too. Her expression didn't change much, but the way she looked at me did. More focused. Like she was adjusting to a new version of the situation. I thought about leaving, but I didn't want to make it awkward. Which, looking back, was pointless because it was already awkward. I just didn't want to escalate it. So I stayed. And that was probably a mistake. At one point, she pulled out her phone. Not to show me anything. Just check something quickly. But I caught a glimpse of the screen. It was a list. Notes. And I saw my name at the top. That's when everything clicked properly. This wasn't just casual searching. This was organized. Intentional. She had written things down. About me. I looked away quickly, pretending I didn't see it. But my mind was already racing. How much did she know? How far did she go? What else had she found? She put her phone down and kept talking like nothing happened. But now every word felt heavier. Like there was something behind it. Something I wasn't seeing. I made an excuse not long after. Something about needing to leave early. She didn't argue. Just nodded like she expected it. That made it worse. Like she knew exactly how the night would go from the start. We stood up, walked toward the exit, and the whole time I felt this strange tension. Not aggressive. Just there. Like something unfinished. Outside, she looked at me for a second longer than normal. Then she said she'd message me later. I nodded and left. I didn't wait. Didn't turn back. When I got home, I checked my phone. Nothing yet. I thought about blocking her right away, but I didn't. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to see what she'd say. About an hour later, the message came through. It wasn't long. Just something about how it was nice meeting me. And then one last line. She mentioned my street again. Not in a threatening way. Just casually. Like it was normal. Like it was part of the conversation. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I blocked her. But even after that, I couldn't stop thinking about how easily she found everything. How much of my life is just out there. And how she sat across from me, acting like it was completely normal to know all of it before I even got there. I remember walking into the little Italian place downtown, the one with the red and white checkered tablecloths, and a ceiling fan that never seemed to stop spinning. I thought it was casual enough for a first date, not too fancy, not too cheap. He was already sitting at the corner table when I arrived, scrolling on his phone like he owned the place. First impression, he looked chill normal, smiling, waving me over. Nothing that screamed danger or warning, just another guy. We ordered drinks. Small talk flowed easily at first. He asked me about work, my hobbies, the usual stuff. I told him a bit about my week. He nodded, laughed at the right moments. I thought maybe this was going okay. He seemed attentive, like he was actually listening. Then came the food. He suggested a few dishes, and I mentioned something about wanting to try the lasagna. He said that sounded good, and we both laughed when the waiter came. He handed the menus over like he hadn't already decided what he wanted. But the first weird sign was when he didn't even glance at the menu. He just looked at me, waited. I joked about how I hadn't even chosen yet, and he waved it off like it didn't matter. He ordered my food for me, just straight up without asking, not in a cute or playful way, not like he was trying to surprise me. It was like he already decided what I needed. The lasagna, exactly the portion I wanted, a side salad, like he had memorized my preferences. I laughed nervously, thinking it was just one of those small control things some people do. Maybe he thought he was being considerate. Then the conversation kept going, and slowly I started noticing more. So comments, small jokes about how I'd cover it, or don't worry about the bill. At first it seemed normal, like he was being gallant. But as the dinner progressed, the vibe shifted. He started assuming I was fine with paying for things. Not because he couldn't, but because he expected it. Every suggestion he made was tied to me covering it. The appetizer, the extra glass of wine, the dessert we didn't even order yet. Everything. He just assumed. It wasn't blatant at first. It was casual, smooth, a line here, a line there. By the time we got the tiramisu, I realized he wasn't joking or testing boundaries. He fully expected me to pay. I tried hinting at splitting it. Said something about my card being right there. Maybe I could chip in. He brushed it off. Laughed. Not kindly. Not charmingly. It wasn't flirty or playful. It was dismissive. He said things like, "Oh, it's fine. I don't want to bother with that." But it wasn't fine. It wasn't a joke. The way he said it made it clear that it was an expectation. My money, my card, my responsibility. I froze a few times mid-conversation. The room didn't feel safe anymore. The casual checkered tablecloths and the smell of garlic bread couldn't hide the tension. I wanted to leave, but it felt too early to just get up. What if I overreacted? By dessert, I was actively trying to slow the pace, trying to make it clear that I wasn't comfortable covering everything. He didn't care. He kept ordering extra things, adding items without asking. Small stuff, but enough to feel oppressive. I started paying more attention to his behavior. The way he leaned back after I reached for my card, smirked slightly like he was satisfied, like he had won. The more I observed, the worse it felt. He wasn't a normal, inconsiderate person. He was calculated, deliberate, like he enjoyed the discomfort I was starting to feel. My stomach was twisting by the time we finished the meal. I barely touched my food because every bite felt tied to his expectations. It wasn't hunger or nerves, it was panic. He suggested going for a drink afterward, just down the street. I hesitated. My instincts screamed at me not to go. But I told myself maybe he would pay this time. Maybe it would be different. It wasn't different. He ordered another round, picked the table closest to the bar, close enough to the bartender so it was obvious he had influence there. I barely realized what he ordered for himself. When the check came, It was all subtle, tiny little comments about "you've got it," and "don't worry about this one either." I stared at him. My hand froze on the card. He didn't even flinch. He didn't break eye contact. He just smiled and nodded slightly, like he was completely in his right. I paid. I didn't argue. I didn't protest. I just paid, thinking maybe this is what people do sometimes. Maybe I'd overreacted, but I couldn't shake the way he looked at me, that smug, satisfied look. It wasn't relief or generosity. It was triumph. We walked out after that. The night air hit me, cold and sharp. I felt numb, almost like I had been living someone else's life for the past 2 hours, like he had been testing me, seeing what I would do, seeing if I would fold. He suggested a walk. I said I was tired, mentioned that I had early plans the next morning. He didn't push too hard, just smiled, like it didn't matter. He had already gotten what he wanted. I kept replaying the night in my head as I got home. Every subtle expectation, every little comment, every dismissive laugh. It wasn't just a bad date. It was a manipulation game I didn't even realize I was part of until it was too late. I realized later that night that I didn't even feel relief at getting home. Just a weird, hollow exhaustion. The kind that comes from realizing someone has been quietly running the show the entire time, and you were completely unaware. I locked the door behind me, sat on the couch, staring at my hands. I kept thinking about how casual it all seemed at first. How normal it had looked. The guy who seemed chill, attentive, funny. And then slowly, without me noticing until it was too late, it had turned into something that didn't feel safe at all. It's strange looking back. The first dinner felt like it started like any other, with drinks, laughs, light conversation. But the subtle escalation, the way he assumed control over everything, it changed the whole experience. I couldn't tell where charm ended and expectation began. I never called him again. Didn't reply to his texts. Didn't go to the places he suggested. Every time my phone buzzed that night, I jumped a little, worried it was him, even though it wasn't. I still think about the way he smiled when I paid. That smugness stuck with me more than anything else. It wasn't just a date that went badly. It was a warning in disguise as something that felt small at first, harmless, and then slowly, completely suffocating. I can remember the smell of garlic bread, the red and white checkered tablecloth, the faint hum of the ceiling fan, and that look on his face like he had won a game I didn't know I was playing. And that's how it ended. Not with a fight, not with the scene, just with me quietly handing over my card and leaving, heart heavy, head spinning, and a lesson I didn't even want to think about. I remember thinking the night would be simple. It was one of those local diner spots with the retro neon signs buzzing faintly outside, the smell of frying bacon mixing with coffee. I thought meeting her here would be casual, easy, a low-pressure first date. I was already a little late, juggling work stuff and traffic, but when I walked in, she was sitting at a booth near the window, scrolling on her phone like she had been waiting forever. She looked normal, smiling when she saw me waiting me over. We ordered our drinks first. She picked a vanilla latte. I went for black coffee. Small talk started easy. What I do for work, where I grew up, movies we liked. She laughed at the right moments, smiled at the right moments, and I thought maybe this would actually be fine. Then she told me I reminded her of someone. At first I didn't think much of it, just a casual comparison. I asked her who, and she smiled, said it was someone from a long time ago, someone who had mattered to her. Fine, I thought, weird, but fine. Then she started crying. Not softly, not the tiny, teary-eyed thing you see sometimes. She just started crying, mid-sentence, right there in the diner booth, wiping her cheeks and hiccuping. Everyone around us glanced over, some whispering, some giving me pitying looks. I didn't know what to do. I froze at first, trying to figure out if this was a joke or if she wanted space. I hesitated, not wanting to make it worse. I watched her sniffle and shake her head, and then she leaned forward, her hands gripping the table, looking at me. She wanted me to comfort her, like I was supposed to be her boyfriend or her old friend or something. She expected me to reach across the table, hold her hands, rub her back, whisper something soothing, anything to calm her down. My brain was scrambling. This was the first date. We'd met maybe 30 minutes ago. This was not normal. I tried small gestures, offering a napkin, keeping my voice calm, trying to stay neutral. But it wasn't enough. She got upset at my hesitation. She wanted more. She wanted me to be this emotional anchor for her, someone I had no right to be yet. The rest of the diner became background noise. The lights flickered over our table, but I was hyper aware of her sobs, her face, her hands, the way she kept telling me how much I reminded her of this other person. I couldn't stop thinking about what she had been expecting. Did she do this often? Was this some test? Was she always like this on first dates? I started to feel trapped. Trapped not by her physically, but by the expectation that I could suddenly transform into a person I wasn't, someone who could instantly shoulder her sadness, comfort her, absorb years of emotional baggage. I felt panic creeping up my throat. My hands tightened around my coffee cup, the warmth of it doing nothing. She told me about him. Long, drawn-out memories, stories of fights, arguments, things that hurt her years ago. It was all wrapped up in this nostalgic pain, and she kept insisting I should understand it, connect with it, be there for her emotionally. She didn't care that we just met. She didn't care that this was supposed to be a casual date. Every sentence she spoke was another layer of demand, pulling me in, testing me, expecting me to perform some role I didn't sign up for. I tried to shift the topic, to distract, to bring it back to neutral ground. Nothing worked. Every attempt made her cry more. Every pause in the conversation seemed like rejection to her. She would sniffle and grab my arm lightly, lean into me, expecting a comfort I couldn't give. I felt my stomach knot, sweat prickling my forehead. I wasn't her old boyfriend. I wasn't anyone from her past. I was just me, and apparently that wasn't enough. Other diners started giving looks. I caught a few stares from the staff as well, and I realized the scene was becoming loud. Her crying had escalated to this full-blown hiccuping, voice-breaking kind of sobbing. She had snot running down her nose, her hands shaking, and she was still leaning toward me, waiting for me to be what I couldn't be. I thought about excuses, about leaving, about anything that would break the tension without humiliating her in front of everyone. But it wasn't just tension. It was fear. Not like I was scared of her physically, but scared of the situation spiraling further, scared that any wrong move would set off another wave of tears and emotional expectation. I felt like I was drowning in someone else's past trauma, and it wasn't even mine. The waitress came by twice, asking if everything was okay, and I forced a smile, saying yes, just needed a minute. Inside, my mind was racing. I tried to imagine leaving, but the exit felt far away. I imagined standing up, paying my half, and just walking out, but I knew she would latch onto it emotionally, accuse me of being cold, uncaring. I remember the way her eyes looked at me. It was pleading, desperate, like I was the only person in the world who could fix a pain that wasn't mine. And that look kept me frozen in place, heart racing, hands gripping the table, wishing for the floor to swallow me up. The next hour blurred. Drinks got cold, food untouched. She alternated between crying and telling me stories, her emotions swinging wildly. I tried to stay calm, tried to nod, tried to offer words that wouldn't make it worse. But she demanded more. Constant reassurance, constant attention. And every time I hesitated, the crying intensified. I realized eventually that I couldn't handle it. Not just the crying, not just the emotional demands, but the way she expected me to be her emotional crutch from the first second we met. My chest tightened. I felt dizzy, like I was suffocating in polite expectation. I had to get out. I had to leave. I told her I needed to step outside for a bit. She followed me halfway before crying more, demanding attention again. I finally excused myself fully, leaving the diner and walking briskly to my car, the night air cold against my sweaty palms. I could still hear her faint sobs through the window. Driving home, my hands gripped the wheel tight. The diner, the neon signs, her face, her demands, all of it replayed in my head. I couldn't believe what had just happened. A first date that had started casually ended in this emotional chaos that wasn't mine to fix. Later that night, I sat on my couch staring at the ceiling, trying to process it. The crying, the sudden expectations, the way she had tried to turn me into someone from her past. It wasn't just unsettling. It was disturbing. It was a reminder that sometimes people carry heavy baggage into places you least expect. And sometimes they don't care who they pull into it. I didn't respond to her messages afterward. I didn't try to reach out. I just let it fade, hoping that was enough for both our sakes. But the image of her crying, the way she expected me to comfort her like a boyfriend I wasn't, stuck with me longer than I expected. It wasn't the kind of date you shake off. It wasn't funny or cute. It was confusing, overwhelming, and a little scary. I went to bed exhausted, not from physical activity, but from being emotionally wrung out by someone else's past. And that's how it ended. Just me, alone, trying to breathe, replaying the diner, the neon lights, her face, and wishing I could erase the whole thing. I thought I had it all figured out. The restaurant was one of those new hip spots with exposed brick walls, Edison bulbs hanging low, and a weird mix of indie music blasting just loud enough to be annoying but not impossible. I got there a little early, sipping on a soda, feeling that mix of excitement and nerves you always get when you're meeting someone from an app for the first time. He walked in right on time, smiling, casual in a hoodie and jeans, holding a cup of coffee like it was a normal Sunday. The first few minutes were fine. We ordered drinks, talked about jobs, hobbies, favorite shows. He laughed at my jokes, I laughed at his, and it felt normal. Actually, I thought he was kind of charming. The kind of person who seems confident but approachable. We even shared a few funny stories about bad dates in the past, and I felt like maybe this was going to be okay. Then his phone buzzed. I didn't think much of it. Everyone checks their phone sometimes, but he didn't just glance at it. He picked it up mid-sentence, swiping with one hand, scrolling through messages, tapping screens while pretending to listen. I noticed the third buzz, then the fourth. At first, I tried to ignore it. Maybe it was work, I told myself. Maybe it's an emergency. But then I caught him showing the screen to himself in these quick little glances, almost like he didn't want me to see. I asked a question about a movie he liked, and he barely looked at me, just muttered something, still thumb-swiping. Curiosity got the better of me, and I leaned slightly forward without trying to be obvious. The screen was bright, too bright against the dim restaurant. I saw profiles. Not one, not two, but multiple dating app profiles. He was actively messaging other people while sitting across from me. And then, without even realizing, he swiped to a conversation and started reading it aloud like it was a casual joke. I froze. I couldn't believe it. He was literally talking to other people, showing me their pictures, laughing about them like I was part of some weird commentary panel. My stomach dropped. The food we ordered suddenly seemed meaningless, the atmosphere oppressive. I didn't know whether to get up and leave or just pretend nothing was happening. He noticed my silence finally and waved his hand like it was nothing, as if I should join him in laughing at these profiles too. I didn't. I stared at him, trying to process how someone could sit there, across from me, and treat our date like a live feed of other options. He didn't seem to get it. He kept scrolling, talking, swiping, even showing me one profile like it was something funny we could both appreciate. I realized he expected me to be entertained by his multitasking, like my feelings were irrelevant. Time slowed down. Every bite of food I picked up felt heavy, tasteless. I could hear people laughing at other tables, glasses clinking, waiters moving around, but none of it registered. It was all background noise to this surreal scene. I kept thinking, how is this real? How is he showing me other women while I sit right here, trying to share a moment? I tried to redirect the conversation. I asked about his favorite places to travel, trying to steer him back to normal interaction. He answered briefly, then immediately went back to his phone. Every word I said seemed to bounce off him, like he was only half there. I watched him type, swipe, tap, scroll. At one point, he read a message from someone else and laughed. Not even a soft chuckle, more like a full-bodied laugh, loud enough that nearby diners noticed. I started to get a creeping panic. I felt trapped. This was supposed to be a first date, something casual and low pressure. Instead, I was part of a live commentary about other matches, a silent audience for him to show off and compare. My brain couldn't keep up. My throat tightened. Every instinct screamed, leave, run, don't waste another minute. But social anxiety rooted me there for a few more minutes until I felt my chest start to hurt. I remember the moment clearly when I realized he wasn't just multitasking. He was actively trying to make me part of this performance. He swiped to one profile and, laughing, asked me for my opinion. It hit me like a punch. He wanted me to judge another woman while sitting in front of me. My hands trembled slightly. My mouth felt dry. I couldn't think of a word to respond. Nothing would have felt right. I tried to maintain composure, saying something vague, but he didn't notice my discomfort. He was too busy, too absorbed in this bizarre ritual of entertainment and validation. I looked around the restaurant, the lights warm and inviting, but I felt completely exposed, like the center of a cruel private show. The other diners didn't know, couldn't know. It was just him and me, and somehow I had ended up in this twisted dynamic. Every minute dragged. I checked my own phone once, pretending to look at a message, just to escape mentally, but it didn't help. The buzzing and swiping across from me was a relentless reminder. He laughed at another profile. I kept my face neutral, trying not to react. Inside, I was seething. Finally, I reached a point where I couldn't handle it anymore. I got up under the pretense of going to the bathroom. I didn't go to the bathroom. I walked straight out the door, feeling the cold air get my face, my chest heaving. The neon of the restaurant sign blurred through my tears. I kept thinking about the audacity, the surreal horror of sitting through that. I didn't answer his messages after that. I blocked him on the app and on my phone. I told a friend later, trying to laugh about it, but it wasn't funny. The memory of him swiping and laughing, treating me like I was some background prop stuck. Even now, when I see someone check their phone mid-date, my heart jumps a little. The memory lingers. It wasn't just rude. It was a total erasure of boundaries, a display of complete disregard for anyone else's feelings. I felt used, humiliated, and trapped in a way I never expected. I still think about the way he laughed at other profiles, the way he wanted me to join in. It wasn't a lesson or a joke. It was a straight-up nightmare disguised as a casual dinner. One of those dates that starts normal and ends making you rethink your entire approach to meeting people. I went home that night feeling like I had survived something surreal, like my brain was trying to process a story that shouldn't exist. I didn't text anyone. I didn't go back. I just sat on my couch staring at the ceiling, heart racing, thinking about what had just happened and how easily it could have gone differently if I had stayed longer. That's it. I walked out and it ended there. But I'll never forget the way he treated the date like it was a game, like I was an audience, like my presence was just another distraction for him. The coffee shop smelled like roasted beans and cinnamon, the kind of place where indie playlists hum quietly in the background and sunlight streamed in through tall windows, making everything look golden and soft. I sat at a small table near the corner, sipping a latte and trying to calm my nerves. She arrived a little late, smiling like nothing was wrong, carrying a backpack and a tote bag, sliding into the seat across from me. First impression was fine. She seemed friendly, funny in a casual way, someone you want to grab coffee with. The first 10 minutes were normal. We talked about school, work, hobbies, the usual icebreaker stuff. She laughed at some of my stories, I laughed at hers, and I thought maybe this was going to be an easy, low-stress date. Then she leaned forward. Not a casual lean to reach her drink or gesture, but deliberate lean. Closer. So close I felt my knee almost touch hers. I shifted in my chair, trying to create a little space. Thinking maybe she didn't notice, she leaned a little more. I laughed nervously, trying to hint that I needed room. She tilted her head, smiling, and said she didn't really believe in personal space. I froze. I thought she was joking at first, but then she scooted closer. Every time I leaned back, she leaned forward. A tiny inch, a deliberate shift. I tried moving my chair back slightly. She leaned again. It was like a game to her, one she was winning effortlessly. I felt the panic start to rise. I kept telling myself to relax, that maybe she was just friendly, affectionate in her own way. But it didn't feel friendly. It felt controlling. My stomach churned. I could feel her eyes on me, intense and unblinking, watching for any reaction. I sipped my latte, hoping to signal distance, hoping she would get the hint. She didn't. She leaned closer, brushing her arm against mine repeatedly. I tried steering the conversation back to neutral topics, like favorite movies or travel spots, hoping to distract her from moving closer. She nodded, listened, laughed, but then leaned again, closer than before. Every time I shifted back, she came forward. It was exhausting. I started to feel trapped, like the edges of the table weren't enough to protect me, like the small coffee shop suddenly felt smaller, too narrow to escape. I noticed people glancing over, probably seeing the awkwardness radiating off me. I felt exposed. It wasn't just that she was close, it was that she didn't care about my comfort. She smiled when I flinched slightly from her elbow brushing mine. She even made a joke about personal space again, saying it was imaginary, like a suggestion rather than a rule. My hands started sweating. I kept picking at my cup, setting it down, moving slightly in my seat, trying to create distance. She followed every movement. The conversation shifted slightly. She asked about my family. I tried to keep it light, sharing small details, hoping for some normal interaction. She leaned forward so far I could feel the warmth from her shoulder. Every instinct told me to get up, to leave, to escape this creeping tension, but social anxiety and politeness rooted me there. I didn't know how to say no, how to enforce boundaries without making things worse. She started touching her hair, brushing it past her shoulders, deliberately coming into my space while doing it. My chest tightened. The latte in my hand felt heavy, almost like a shield I couldn't put down. Every glance around the coffee shop felt like people could see the silent battle happening, the invisible line I couldn't make her respect. I tried joking about being a little claustrophobic. She laughed, leaned further in, saying again she didn't believe in personal space. I realized then that nothing I did would stop her from moving closer. It wasn't about comfort or friendship. It was about control. I felt panic rising. My hands shook slightly on the cup. My breathing quickened. I thought about excuses, making up a sudden commitment, leaving right then, but she kept talking, leaning closer, ignoring the invisible line I was waving frantically. The sun shifted in the windows, casting long shadows across the table. I noticed her bag was almost pressed against mine, her elbow resting near my forearm. Every inch she gained felt deliberate, almost predatory in its casualness. She told a story about a friend who loved people being close, using it like an anecdote, but the way she leaned made it feel personal, like she was testing me, testing my reaction. I tried to laugh nervously, sip my latte again, slide my chair back, anything to assert space. Nothing worked. My brain started spinning. I thought about the exit, the door maybe 10 feet away, and the absurdity of needing to escape a coffee date. I could feel my pulse in my temples, my palms damp. She leaned again while laughing at something she said, elbow brushing mine so lightly it felt intentional. I realized she would keep moving closer no matter what I did. It wasn't about being funny anymore. It was about ignoring my discomfort entirely. Finally, I made a decision. I put my cup down, stood up slowly, told her I needed to go check something outside. She smiled, leaned again as if following me in spirit. I walked to the door, out into the cool air, feeling my heart racing. I didn't look back. I didn't text her again. The memory of her disregard for my personal space, the slow creeping closeness that no words could stop, stuck with me. Even later, when I sit in a cafe or a public place, I feel a residual tension in my chest, a small panic in crowded spaces. It wasn't just a date gone wrong. It was the realization that someone could ignore boundaries completely, treat you like a prop, test your patience in the most subtle, unnerving way. I still think about that latte, still think about the way the chair seemed to shrink, how the corner of the coffee shop suddenly felt like a cage. I think about her smile, how friendly it looked but felt controlling. I think about the little inch she gained every time I leaned away, the slow, persistent invasion of space that made a simple coffee feel like a nightmare scenario. I went home that day feeling tense, exhausted, like I had been in a psychological marathon. I didn't respond to her messages. I blocked her. I told a friend briefly, try and make light of it. The tension in my chest never fully left. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't violent. It was subtle, slow, and persistent, the kind of discomfort that sticks with you. It ended with me standing outside, heart racing, lungs tight, and a small sense of relief just to be out of reach. The coffee shop looked normal again in the sunlight, but inside, the memory of her lean, the disregard for my boundaries, remained vivid. It was a first date, yes, but it was also a lesson in how completely someone could ignore your personal space, make you uncomfortable, and leave you trapped in your own anxiety. That's all. I walked away, and it ended there. Nothing fancy, nothing dramatic, just a slow, creeping horror that made a simple coffee feel like a trap. I didn't expect the day to go south, not at all. We had grabbed coffee at this tiny corner shop in my neighborhood, the kind of place with cracked leather chairs and local art on the walls. It smelled like cinnamon rolls and espresso, warm and inviting. The first hour had been okay, maybe even fun. Conversation was light. We joked about music and movies, nothing heavy, just casual chatter. I thought things were fine. Then, as the date started winding down, he said he wanted to walk me home. I told him no. I had this thing about not giving out my exact address on first dates, and I also live in a building that's a 5-minute walk from the cafe. It's not far, but I wanted to feel in control. I expected him to shrug, maybe joke about it, maybe insist once lightly. Instead, his smile faltered, and he looked genuinely offended. It was the first red flag, but I didn't react fast enough. He started pacing behind me as we left the cafe, close enough that I could feel him breathing behind me, insisting that it was safer and he didn't mind. I repeated that I was fine, that I lived close by. He ignored me. Every step I took, he matched, keeping a pace that didn't let me put any distance between us. The street was dim. the glow from street lamps casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. It was quiet, except for the occasional car and the sound of our shoes on concrete. He started asking where exactly I lived. I refused again, giving vague answers. He said he was offended, like it was a personal betrayal. The tone in his voice was light, almost playful, but the way he followed my steps, the way he lingered too close, made it feel threatening. I tried walking faster, hoping to shake him off, hoping the walk would end soon, but he matched every move, every step, keeping that distance so minimal I felt cornered on a public sidewalk. I tried to redirect, talking about random things to distract him, anything to make him stop pushing. He nodded, listened, smiled, but then came back to the same topic, insisting again that he should walk me, insisting that I give him my address. I felt my stomach knot. It wasn't a joke anymore. The casual fun we'd had at the cafe dissolved into tension. My fingers twisted in my bag strap. The streetlights flickered, and I felt every shadow stretch, every corner suddenly looking like it could hide something worse. I thought about making a break for my building, maybe darting up the stairs to my apartment and locking the door. But the path from the street to my entrance is narrow, flanked by walls and parked cars, giving him plenty of cover if he wanted to step in front. Panic started creeping in. My mind raced, imagining every worst-case scenario. He smiled, leaning slightly toward me like he was trying to coax me. Every instinct screamed to run, but I couldn't shake him off immediately. He started commenting about trust, how walking someone home was a basic courtesy, how refusing made me strange. His tone flipped easily from playful to passive-aggressive. I kept repeating that I appreciated it, that I lived close, that I didn't need him to follow me. He waved it off, pressing, following, demanding specifics. Every block felt longer than it should, every streetlight a checkpoint, every pedestrian a potential witness I couldn't rely on. My phone was in my pocket, but I hesitated to pull it out. One wrong movement, one glance toward him, could make him angrier. He commented on my hands reaching for my bag, misinterpreting it as hesitation or flirtation. It was exhausting. I felt trapped in my own neighborhood, my safe space turned into a pressure cooker. I realized that his insistence was less about safety and more about control. He wanted to dictate my movement, my actions, my boundaries. Finally, my building came into view. I slowed, hoping that once we reached the front door, he would get the hint. He stepped close, peering down the path with me, eyes scanning as if he owned the space. He asked one last time for the exact apartment number. I said no. The offense on his face was almost tangible. He shifted, crossing his arms, smirking slightly, but I felt the tension radiating off him. I unlocked the front door quickly, shoving it open, and stepped inside. He lingered outside, muttering something about not understanding, something about trust. I closed the door gently behind me, but left it unlatched to observe. He didn't linger too long, walking off slowly down the street, but the unease didn't leave me. I sank to the bottom step, shaking slightly, feeling my chest heaving. What should have been a simple walk home turned into a calculated test of control, a power play. Later, I sat on my couch trying to process. It wasn't dramatic. There was no shouting, no public scene, no physical confrontation. It was subtle, it was slow, and it was persistent. The way he pressed, the way he made offense a weapon, the way he refused to respect my boundaries, it all lingered. I realized he wasn't interested in me as a person, but in controlling me, enforcing compliance under the guise of courtesy. The next day, I told a friend what happened, and they were stunned. It sounded minor on paper, a simple insistence to walk someone home, but the emotional weight was heavy. Feeling trapped on my own street, in my own neighborhood with someone pressing and following was a subtle horror that stayed with me. I didn't respond to any messages after that. I blocked him. I told myself that nothing happened, that I made it home safely, but the memory was vivid. The lingering discomfort, the way he twisted a simple offer into pressure, made me wary of first dates for weeks. Every time someone offered to walk me somewhere, I pictured the narrow sidewalk, the dim light, the insistence, the offense at my refusal. It ended simply with me inside, locked doors, the safe distance restored. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic. Just a first date that turned into a psychological trap, a reminder that boundaries aren't always respected and that courtesy can be weaponized. It was quiet, subtle, and deeply unsettling. I thought the night was going to be chill. We picked this trendy little place downtown that had exposed brick walls and fairy lights strung all over the ceiling. It smelled faintly of garlic and wine, cozy but not stuffy, and the vibe was casual enough that I didn't feel pressure to dress up. I read my phone a few messages while waiting for her, watching people pass by outside. The air was mild, spring hitting the city streets in this warm kind of way that made you want to linger in cafes and bars. I thought we'd have a fun, easy night. She arrived and everything looked fine at first. Nice smile, decent conversation starter, a bit more energetic than I expected, but not overwhelming. We got seated at a corner table, right under a string of low-hanging lights, and I thought the atmosphere was perfect. Then came the menus. She picked it up like she owned the place, scanning every page, eyes bright, and I noticed she went straight for the priciest items. Lobster, the fancy pasta with truffles, a bottle of wine that had numbers in the hundreds. I raised my eyebrows, trying to hint casually that maybe we keep it reasonable, but she didn't catch it. She just ordered, seemingly oblivious, with that smile like everything was normal. I figured, whatever, maybe she wanted to treat herself, and I had been looking forward to a nice night out anyway. I ordered something mid-range, nothing fancy, just something I liked. When the server left, she laughed, light and airy, and said she forgot her wallet, in a way that wasn't apologetic. It was casual, like it happened all the time. Then came the suggestion, framed as a joke but with this glint in her eye that made me uneasy. She hinted that I should be a gentleman and cover it. I froze for a second, trying to gauge if she was joking. Her smile stayed put, warm but confident, the kind that didn't really leave room for negotiation. I started doing the math in my head. I didn't mind covering the small slip, but this was a hefty bill, way beyond what I had planned for a casual dinner. The air felt heavy, the hum of the restaurant suddenly louder, every clink of cutlery magnified. I tried to laugh it off, make a face like, oh wow, that's a lot, but she leaned in, polite and charming, like she was expecting the yes. As the food arrived, I noticed how she dug in like this was normal, savoring every bite, sipping the expensive wine and occasionally glancing at me with that knowing look. It was like I was part of a performance she orchestrated. I kept trying to find a way to subtly hint that I couldn't pay, mentioning my own budget, the rent, bills, but it was like invisible words. She waved them off, smiling, leaning closer with that casual expectation that I would handle it. I tried to redirect conversation, talking about movies, music, some local events, anything to distract from the looming cost. She nodded, listened, but every few minutes she'd bring it back, jokingly pressing, giving me that gentleman look. I noticed other diners glancing, probably sensing the tension, that unspoken battle of expectation. It wasn't loud, nothing dramatic, just a subtle pressure of someone assuming you'll comply without asking. The bill came and she glanced at it, still smiling, still light, still like this was the most normal thing in the world. She pulled her bag closer and fumbled as if checking again for the wallet. The gesture made me uneasy, deliberate or not. I couldn't tell. I felt cornered, this polite pretense masking a demand. She sipped the wine like nothing was wrong, eyes bright, watching me reach for my wallet. I felt my pulse spike, my hands tense. It was one of those moments where the charm and civility of a date twisted into discomfort, where laughter hid manipulation. I covered the bill reluctantly, and she made a small comment of thanks, almost like she'd just gotten what she wanted, light and casual, as if she hadn't just pushed me into spending way more than I intended. The walk out of the restaurant was worse. She fell into step beside me, cheerful and chatty, acting like everything was fine, while in my head I ran over the numbers, the pressure, the unease. The air outside was cooler, but it didn't help. It felt like her expectation followed me, every step a reminder of how the night had twisted from casual dinner to financial trap. I didn't feel comfortable, didn't feel playful. I felt drained, like I'd been maneuvered through a social obstacle course I didn't agree to enter. She kept talking about restaurants, vacations, things she wanted to do, all lightly casually, as if a whole expensive meal had been a normal setup. I tried to keep up, nodded, laughed at the right moments, but inside I was replaying the night, questioning my own reactions, wondering if I'd misread, if the discomfort was mine alone. By the time we reached the street corner where we were supposed to part, I was exhausted. She made a quick joke about next time, like she hadn't just orchestrated a high-stakes maneuver. I said bye, polite but drained, trying to shake off the tension. She waved, smiling, and walked away, leaving me standing there, wallet lighter, mood heavy, mind buzzing. It wasn't a horror story with loud screams or a dramatic exit. It was a slow, creeping discomfort, the kind that presses on you long after, where the charm is a weapon and politeness a trap. I took the subway home, sat in a corner seat, and stared at the floor. Every sound in the car felt amplified. Every glance felt like it could be her judging. The evening's warmth had evaporated into this tight, sinking feeling in my chest. I kept replaying moments, imagining alternatives, wishing I'd walked away earlier, wishing I'd noticed the pattern before it was too late. When I finally reached my apartment and closed the door, the relief was physical, but the residue stayed. A date that should have been light and fun turned into this draining negotiation, this subtle manipulation. The worst part wasn't the money, though that hurt. It was the way the night had warped expectations, politeness twisted into pressure, charm into coercion. It stayed with me quiet but heavy, replaying every step, every smile, every casual suggestion. I didn't hear from her again, thankfully, but I keep thinking about that evening when I see restaurants, menus, even casual smiles from strangers. It's a memory that lingers, subtle, creeping, a reminder that horror isn't always loud and fast. It can be polite, elegant, and painfully deliberate. That night was the kind of horror that makes you question your instincts, your boundaries, and your ability to trust appearances. It ended simply with me inside, doors locked, wallet lighter, and the lingering, quiet pressure of a charm-turned weapon. I was excited for this one. It was Friday night, the city buzzing with lights, music leaking from every corner cafe and bar. I had picked a new tapas place, the kind with tiny tables packed close together and candles flickering in glass jars on every surface. The smell of garlic, herbs, and toasted bread made my stomach growl as I waited for him. I thought it would be casual, fun, maybe some laughs, maybe getting to know someone new in a city that often felt too fast and too crowded. He showed up right on time, smiling, dressed neatly but not over the top, like he had put in effort without trying too hard. We shook hands awkwardly at first, but it felt polite and normal. I led him to the table and we sat, menus open, the low hum of chatter around us. He looked at the menu for a moment, then closed it, which struck me as a little unusual. He didn't order right away. Instead, he leaned back, folding his hands, and started asking questions. Normal stuff at first, about school, jobs, hobbies, but then it began to shift. I noticed the questions getting sharper and more precise. It started with what I did for work and what my schedule was like. Fine, normal, but then he asked about my salary. At first, I thought maybe he was curious, but the way he phrased it, so casually yet probing, felt like an interview question rather than conversation. I laughed nervously and gave a vague answer, hoping he'd move on. He didn't. He asked more specifically about savings, investments, whether I had debts. The air felt suddenly tight, like everyone around us was suddenly aware of what was happening. The appetizers arrived, a couple plates of olives and croquettes, and I tried to shift the focus, talking about food, the city, a local band playing nearby. He nodded, smiled, then pivoted right back. He asked about my family, whether I was close to them, how much my parents had helped me financially. It was like sitting in a one-on-one HR interview, only the setting was supposed to be fun, light, the kind of night where I could sip wine and laugh at dumb jokes. Instead, I felt under a microscope. I tried to steer the conversation toward movies, the restaurant, anything safe, but every time I made a small joke or changed the topic, he found a way to loop back. He asked whether I would ever consider a prenup. I froze, mid-bite, feeling the fork tremble in my hand. Prenup, on a first date. It was insane, absurd, and terrifying all at once. He smiled while waiting for an answer, patient and almost clinical, like he was grading my response. I tried to laugh, to deflect, but he persisted, asking if I had thought about that with previous partners, if money was a concern for me in relationships. The wine came, the deep red clinging to the glass, making the candlelight flicker against the walls. I sipped it slowly, hoping to buy some time, hoping he'd realize the line had been crossed. But no, he went deeper, asking about future earnings, career plans, and hypothetical scenarios like would I support him if his job failed. The questions weren't just awkward, they were invasive, aggressive in this polite, controlled way. It felt like being trapped in a lecture I didn't sign up for, one where every personal detail was up for review, and my worth seemed measured by numbers on a spreadsheet. People at nearby tables glanced, some smiling awkwardly at the intensity, others looking away, trying to pretend they didn't notice. The restaurant felt suddenly smaller, the walls closing in as he leaned forward, hands folded, eyes sharp and curious. I kept trying to shift the topic, asking about his work, his hobbies, anything that didn't involve my finances or plans for marriage, but he redirected with the same controlled precision, returning to my answers as if they were exam responses. I realized around the main course that he had no intention of turning it into a casual night. Each question felt rehearsed, like he had a checklist, probing for weaknesses or confirmations of some unspoken standard. I ate mechanically, trying to keep my composure, all the while noting the discomfort building in my chest. It wasn't just awkward, it was alarming. I wanted to get up, leave, make some excuse, but the social pressure, the subtle expectation of politeness, kept me rooted in place. The desserts arrived, tiny tarts and chocolates, but I couldn't enjoy them. He asked if I saved for luxury items, what kind of insurance I had, how financially independent I was. It felt like he had pulled the conversation straight from a corporate handbook and applied it to dating. The juxtaposition of the soft restaurant lighting, the music drifting faintly through the room, and the sheer intensity of the questions made my stomach churn. I kept scanning the room for an exit that didn't exist. By the time the check came, I realized I had been navigating this bizarre, suffocating labyrinth for hours. He didn't offer to split it or suggest we go for drinks afterward. He folded his hands again and waited calm, expecting me to finish the evening without complaint. The act of paying felt like the last piece of endurance, the final formality in a night that had turned completely upside down. I left the restaurant relieved to be out of the spotlight, the weight of the questions following me like shadows as we walked to the street. Outside, the night air was cooler but didn't alleviate the tension. I wanted distance, space, anything to normalize what had just happened. He chatted casually about other things, completely ignoring how surreal the date had been, while I kept my eyes on the pavement, trying to make sense of it. Every step felt heavy, as if my legs carried the memory of every invasive question, every probe into personal life, every financial scenario I hadn't agreed to discuss. When we parted ways, I didn't even shake hands, just muttered a polite goodbye and walked quickly away, heart still racing. The whole night played back in my mind in slow motion. The menus, the wine, the questions, the way he had leaned forward with that calm, measured curiosity that made everything feel like a trap. It wasn't a horror story with yelling or confrontation, just a quiet, invasive pressure that left me drained and rattled. I got home and locked the door, sinking against it, staring at the floor, trying to untangle the knot of discomfort. The memory lingered, every detail replaying vividly, the way he framed questions, the casual yet precise tone, the feeling that my life had been audited without consent. It was one of those nights that leaves an imprint not through chaos but through subtle control, where politeness is weaponized, charm becomes scrutiny, and a supposed fun night turns into a slow, suffocating horror that stays with you long after the lights are out. The worst part was how he hadn't even noticed. He walked away, thinking the date had been normal, maybe even enjoyable, while I replayed every moment, every pause, every expectant glance. The night ended simply with me inside, door locked, drained, and aware that not all horror comes with screams. Someone arrives dressed in a smile, carrying a clipboard, and asking you about your savings while everyone around you pretends it's just another Friday night. I should have known the night was going sideways the moment we sat down at that dimly lit cafe tucked into a quiet side street. It had that kind of vibe that looks safe in photos, but feels cramped when you're actually there. The walls painted a dark red, and the air smelling faintly of espresso and melted chocolate. I had been looking forward to a chill night, maybe laughing over drinks, learning a bit about someone new. Instead, I got swept into something that felt more like a psychological experiment than a date. She arrived right on time, looking polished and casual at the same time, like she had rehearsed every step, but not overdone it. She smiled, I smiled, we sat, ordered coffee and small plates, and at first it seemed normal. The conversation flowed lightly about music, weekend plans, and movies. Then, about 45 minutes in, she started dropping these little comments, almost casual, about how some people couldn't be trusted, how loyalty was tested in small ways. At first, I laughed it off, thinking it was a quirky remark. Then things got weird fast. She kept gesturing at the couple sitting a few tables away, a friend of hers I hadn't noticed before. The friend leaned a bit closer to me, laughing at jokes I hadn't made, touching my arm lightly while talking. I froze. Something about it felt off. I looked at her, trying to read her face, but she just smiled faintly, eyes calm, calculating. The night had shifted from casual to tense in seconds. Every movement of mine suddenly felt observed, every glance weighted. I tried to keep my composure, shrugging off the interaction with her friend, trying to act normal. She watched me like she was scoring every reaction. Then she started asking questions, innocent enough on the surface. What kind of friends I hung out with, how I handled attention from others, if I liked social gatherings. The questions were fine until I noticed the underlying test. She wanted to see if I'd react differently when her friend flirted or tried to provoke a reaction. I caught myself tensing every time her friend leaned in or laughed at a joke I barely made. I realized I was constantly calculating my behavior, my tone, even my facial expressions. She asked me hypotheticals about situations where someone attractive might try to get close to me, and what I would do. It felt like she was mapping out my moral compass in real time, testing limits I didn't agree to be tested on. The coffee cups cooled, untouched to the tension built. I felt trapped. The friend nearby continued subtle gestures that seemed harmless alone but were unnerving in context. She didn't acknowledge them outwardly, but every once in a while she'd glance at me, a tiny smirk, like she was marking points on some invisible scoreboard. The cafe seemed smaller, the other customers blurry around the edges. It wasn't loud or aggressive, just insidious, a kind of manipulation that made my stomach churn. At one point she leaned forward and casually told me she had been testing me all night, that every little interaction, every glance, every reaction had been carefully observed. The friends flirting, the hypotheticals, the subtle provocations, they were all part of a loyalty test. My stomach dropped, my hands gripping the edge of the table, and for a moment I didn't speak. The air felt suddenly heavier, thick with expectation and judgment. It wasn't a joke, it wasn't a game, it was a deliberate, controlled stress test, and I was the unwilling subject. She continued, describing the rules as if they were simple and obvious. She wanted to see how I handled temptation, whether I maintained composure, whether I respected boundaries. Everything had been orchestrated, and I realized that nothing in the evening had been casual. The conversation, the laughs, the gestures, it was all part of this hidden framework, and I had been navigating it blindly. I felt my pulse spike. The cafe noise became background static, a blur of clinking cups and muffled laughter. I tried to redirect the conversation to talk about the city, the food, anything that wasn't about tests and loyalty, but she kept circling back, dissecting my reactions. She asked about past relationships, about times I might have been tempted, and every answer I gave was analyzed, weighed, scored in her mind. The friend's presence was a constant, silent pressure, a reminder of the invisible experiment I hadn't signed up for. Every glance, every laugh, every incidental touch felt magnified, a tool to provoke and observe. I caught myself overthinking everything, trying to act perfectly, trying to avoid giving her a reason to think I had failed some invisible standard. The mental exhaustion hit me like a wave, a fatigue deeper than just sitting too long. It was the kind of tired that came from constant vigilance. The desserts arrived, but I barely touched them. The chocolate mousse and tiny fruit tarts were irrelevant. The night had shifted entirely from casual to something intense, something draining. She explained, almost casually, that the tests weren't meant to be cruel, but were essential to her understanding of character. She framed every interaction as a lesson, every reaction as meaningful data. The friend lingered nearby, a subtle reminder that I was being evaluated at all times. As we wrapped up, I felt a strange mix of relief and disbelief. We stood outside, the streetlights casting long shadows, the night air cool but not soothing. She walked beside me, still discussing scenarios, hypothetical loyalty challenges, as if the date had been perfectly normal and the tests were just part of her standard routine. I nodded, pretending to absorb her words while my brain raced, replaying every interaction, every glance, every tiny signal I had subconsciously responded to. I left that night with a strange weight in my chest, a combination of relief to be away and unease from having been put through something I hadn't agreed to. The psychological toll lingered, subtle but persistent, a gnawing feeling that had nothing to do with conflict or drama, but with boundaries crossed and control asserted under the guise of testing. It was one of those nights that left a mark, not because of yelling or confrontation, but because the horror was quiet, deliberate, and deeply personal. Once I got home, I sat on the couch, staring at the wall, trying to untangle what had happened. The friend's subtle provocations, the orchestrated hypotheticals, the casual claims of testing. It all replayed in my mind like a movie I didn't want to watch. Every detail felt magnified, every gesture loaded with intent I had never anticipated. The exhaustion was mental, a kind that lingered long after the physical presence of the night had ended. It wasn't a traditional horror story. There were no screams, no shouting, no chaos. The terror was in control, in manipulation, in having a normal social setting turned into a calculated assessment of morality and loyalty. It was disturbing because it was quiet, insidious, and something I couldn't prepare for. I realized that some dates don't end with drama. Some end with a lingering unease, a mental fatigue, a personal invasion that doesn't announce itself until hours later. I sat there, door locked, lights low, replaying every moment, every subtle test, every tiny provocation. The night had ended simply, without confrontation, without drama, but the memory lingered, sharp and uncomfortable. It was a reminder that not all horror is obvious. Some of it walks in with a smile, sets up scenarios, and observes, leaving you questioning every reaction long after you're safe inside. I thought the date was going fine at first. We met at this small diner on the edge of town, one of those places that smell like fries and syrup, where the booths are sticky but somehow cozy. I was trying to keep it casual, figuring we get some food, talk a bit, maybe laugh a little, nothing serious. He showed up in a shirt and jeans, nothing fancy, which was fine. He smiled, I smiled, and we sat down. The first few minutes were normal, light chatter about favorite shows and weekend plans. Then the first joke came. At first, it seemed harmless, a little teasing about how I didn't like pineapple on pizza. I laughed politely, but the tone was off, sharper than teasing should be. Then he started dropping more of them, subtle digs disguised as humor. Comments about my clothes, my laugh, even the way I reached for my drink. Each one was framed as a joke, but the words carried a sting that made my chest tighten a little. I tried to ignore it, thinking maybe I was overthinking, but the pattern grew too obvious to dismiss. As the plates arrived, the jokes didn't stop. Every time I answered a question or shared a thought, he had a comment ready. They weren't funny. They weren't playful. They were critiques masquerading as humor, thinly veiled insults delivered with a grin. I felt my stomach knotting up, this mix of anger and disbelief. I tried to point it out, subtly at first, but he brushed it off with a laugh, telling me I was being too sensitive. The more he insisted I was overreacting, the more self-conscious I became. The diner buzzed around us, other customers laughing or talking, oblivious, and I sat frozen, trying to navigate every word, every tone. It was exhausting. The conversation was no longer a dialogue. It was a minefield. Every response I gave seemed to trigger a new joke, a new insult, and then the reassurance that I was imagining it, that I was too uptight, too sensitive to get the humor. He leaned back in his booth, sipping his soda, smiling like he had done nothing wrong. I realized he wasn't just being playful. He was controlling the conversation, setting boundaries in a way that made me doubt myself. It was small at first, the way he would laugh at something that stung, the way he shrugged off any pushback, but it escalated. By the time the main course arrived, I felt trapped in this weird psychological loop, my own reactions being manipulated without me agreeing to it. The food was cold before I could focus on it. The words kept coming, subtle jabs about my career, the way I talked about my friends, my taste in music. Each one framed as humor, each one followed by a smirk and the reminder that I was too sensitive. My patience was thinning, but the more I tried to assert myself, the more he doubled down. I caught myself biting my tongue, forcing polite laughter when I wanted to snap back, to call it out, to get up and leave. I noticed the way the other diners looked at us sometimes, probably wondering why I was laughing nervously at comments that weren't funny. The staff would glance over occasionally, catching parts of the conversation, but they didn't intervene. The tension built silently, this constant push and pull between insult and justification. It was exhausting, mentally and physically. I felt smaller with every joke, every insinuation, every dismissal of my feelings. He even started pointing out things from my past, seemingly innocent stories that I shared, and twisting them into jokes that made me look naive or weak. Every laugh you got at my expense reinforced the power dynamic, this strange feeling that my emotions were a problem, that reacting normally was somehow a flaw. I found myself second-guessing everything I said, the tone I used, the way I gestured, all while he smiled, acting like it was just harmless fun. As the meal wound down, the pattern didn't stop. Even dessert wasn't safe. He made remarks about my choices, my appearance, my personality, always framed as humor, but with the bite clearly there. I started zoning out, counting ceiling tiles, watching waiters pass, anything to distract myself from the barrage of disguised insults. My arms crossed, shoulders tense, trying to shrink into myself, hoping it would end soon. When the bill came, I felt a flicker of relief. Not because I was excited to pay, but because it signaled the end of the evening. We left the diner, and the night air hit me like a wave of relief. The walk home was quiet, awkward, filled with the lingering tension of what had just happened. He made one last joke about how sensitive I seemed, and I realized this had been the entire tone of the night. Every interaction, every word, every laugh had been a test to see how I would respond to constant belittling, all under the guise of humor. I got home and sat on my bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every insult and every time he told me I was overreacting. It was a strange mix of disbelief and anger, the kind of horror that doesn't scream or yell, but slowly erodes confidence. The jokes weren't funny, they weren't playful, they weren't light. They were a tool, a way to assert control while making me doubt my own reactions. The night left a residue, a subtle fatigue, a distrust of casual compliments, a wariness of laughter that masked criticism. I realized the danger wasn't in shouting or confrontation. It was in the quiet manipulation, the way a person could weaponize humor to erode your sense of self without ever seeming aggressive. It was disturbing because it felt normal at first, charming even, until you were trapped in the rhythm and couldn't leave without feeling like you were overreacting. I stayed up late thinking about the evening, every word, every smirk, every laugh that had carried a hidden sting. The horror wasn't immediate or dramatic. It was subtle, quiet, and lingering, a reminder that some people can twist normal social interaction into a game that leaves you drained and doubting yourself. The memory was vivid, not because of loud chaos, but because of control, manipulation, and the quiet erosion of self-esteem masked as humor. Even now, days later, thinking about that night makes my stomach tighten. The disguised insults, the constant gaslighting, the forced laughter, all of it sticks in my mind like a warning. It was a date that didn't end with confrontation, drama, or a fight, but with exhaustion and disbelief, a mental weight I didn't expect to carry home. I learned quickly that horror doesn't always come with screams or sudden violence. Sometimes it comes with a smile, a joke, and the slow, insidious undermining of confidence. I remember that night clearly, mostly because everything felt off from the start, but in a weird, slow-building way. We agreed to meet at this rooftop cafe downtown, the kind with fairy lights strung across the railings and city noise humming faintly below. It seemed casual, breezy, the perfect place to talk, laugh, maybe get to know someone. She showed up with a big smile, like she was genuinely happy to see me, and I felt that little spark of relief you get when first impressions line up with expectations. I didn't know what I was walking into. We sat at a table near the edge, overlooking the streetlights and the little cars that moved like fireflies. The night was cool, the smell of grilled food drifting from the kitchen, the sound of soft chatter and clinking glasses floating in the background. Conversation started easy, almost too easy. She asked questions, I answered, we laughed, exchanged small stories, the usual. But there was this undercurrent, subtle but sharp, a sense that she was measuring me somehow, weighing me against something I couldn't see. An hour passed, and then it happened. Mid-laugh, mid-sentence, she stopped, looked at me dead on, and asked if I'd be okay appearing in her revenge post aimed at her ex. She wanted to tag me publicly. I froze, the words hitting me like a splash of cold water. I couldn't process it at first. The casual way she brought it up, like it was normal to involve a stranger in some personal vendetta. My mind scrambled, trying to picture what that even meant, how it would look, how it would feel, and why she thought it was okay to ask me in person. She kept talking about the idea casually, as if I were supposed to nod along and play my part. She described the post in detail, the angle, the tone, even the captions she had in mind. Every detail made my stomach churn more. She spoke about it like it was a fun little project, a joke, a harmless act of payback. The more she explained, the more I felt trapped, like the walls of that rooftop table were closing in. The lights above flickered, and the laughter of other diners sounded distant, almost mocking. I tried to steer the conversation away, talking about work, hobbies, anything else, but she circled back. She wanted me to be part of it, wanted me to be a pawn in a public display aimed at humiliating someone else. I felt panic creeping in, the sense that this wasn't a one-off weird request. It was a pattern of thinking, a way of involving people in her personal drama without consent. The cafe suddenly felt claustrophobic, the music too loud, the lights too harsh. She started suggesting ways I could appear in photos, what expressions to make, how to look supportive or happy, like I was complicit in her revenge. It wasn't a suggestion anymore, it was a demand, framed lightly, as if I'd be mean or uncooperative if I refused. The idea of being publicly tagged, associated with this, terrified me. I imagined her ex scrolling through social media, seeing my face linked to this post, judging, speculating, questioning. The thought made my stomach knot tighter with every passing second. I looked around, hoping for some kind of lifeline, some distraction, but the night carried on normally around us. Couples laughed, waiters moved plates with ease, and nobody noticed the mental trap I was stuck in. She seemed oblivious to my discomfort, or maybe she enjoyed it. The more I hesitated, the more she leaned in, smiling, explaining alternate versions of the post, different scenarios, almost gleeful at the thought of my participation. At that moment, I realized the horror wasn't just the post itself. It was the audacity, a total lack of boundaries, the way she casually weaponized social media and involved someone she barely knew. The casualness of it made it worse than yelling or anger, worse than confrontation, because it normalized manipulation. It was a slow, creeping dread, realizing that a stranger could pull me into a personal vendetta without any hesitation or concern for consequences. The food arrived, but I couldn't focus. The smell, the taste, all faded into background noise as I tried to plan a polite but firm way to extract myself. Every word she said seemed rehearsed, practiced, designed to lure compliance. I realized she was testing me, maybe seeing how far she could push, how much I would tolerate before saying no. The date had turned into a trap, and I was in it, unaware until that single moment. I tried shifting topics again, asking about her hobbies, her favorite shows, pretending to be engaged, but she always circled back to the revenge post. The more she described it, the more I felt cornered, my own agency slipping away. I thought about leaving, making some excuse, walking away, but even imagining it felt like betrayal. Her expression didn't change, always smiling, eyes locked on me like I was part of her plan. The night dragged on. She began sharing stories about her ex, framing him as awful, manipulative, cruel, and then tying it back to the post. She wanted me there as validation, a witness, a prop in her narrative. My mind raced, imagining every possible outcome. Every friend seeing the tag, every stranger associating my face with this revenge. The fear was subtle, insidious, a creeping unease that settled deep in my chest. At one point, she even suggested filming short clips, making it dynamic, interactive, something she could post on multiple platforms. My stomach dropped. The idea of being part of her digital weapon, publicly, permanently, terrified me more than anything. I tried to laugh it off, to deflect, to act casual, but every suggestion she made felt like a rope tightening around me. She wasn't asking. She was assuming I'd comply eventually, and the assumption alone was frightening. I kept thinking of excuses, ways to extricate myself politely, but everything seemed inadequate. The night sky above was dark and endless, the city lights sparkling but meaningless compared to the intensity of her request. She leaned back, still smiling, seemingly satisfied that I was at least considering it. I felt cornered, trapped in a social nightmare where saying no might make me seem cold or uncooperative, but saying yes would drag me into someone else's digital vendetta. Hours felt like minutes, and when we finally left the cafe, the walk to the subway felt surreal. Every step, I imagined her typing, drafting, scheming, planning ways to publicly associate me with this post. I couldn't shake the image of her phone, her finger hovering over share, my face ready to appear in a narrative I had no control over. The streets were quiet, but my mind was loud, replaying the night. Every phrase, every casual suggestion, every smile that had carried manipulation. I finally got home and shut the door behind me, heart racing, mind spinning. The worst part wasn't confrontation or anger. It was subtle, psychological, the quiet terror of being considered a tool for someone else's revenge. I sat in my bed, staring at the ceiling, realizing how quickly a night that started with light conversation and rooftop lights could turn into an invasive, manipulative trap. Thinking about it later, the horror wasn't just the idea of appearing in a post. It was the audacity, the normalization of using someone else without consent, the casual assumption that I'd be okay with it. It was a creeping, slow realization that social interactions can carry hidden dangers, that a person can weaponize technology and charm to pull you into a scenario you never agreed to. The memory sticks because it was subtle, but it's vivid, a mental scar from a night where my boundaries were tested and ignored under the guise of casual fun. I never thought a hug could feel like a trap, but that night proved me wrong. The date started normal enough. We met at this small art cafe on a side street, the kind with mismatched chairs, weird paintings on the walls, and the faint smell of coffee mixed with baked goods. It was cozy, the kind of place you expect casual conversation and maybe a good laugh. I remember feeling a little nervous, hoping for a chill night, maybe a connection, but nothing prepared me for what happened at the end. We ordered drinks, sat by the window, watching the street outside where a few people walked dogs and others hurried past under umbrellas. At first, he seemed fine, friendly, a little awkward maybe, but harmless. Conversation flowed about music, movies, random life stuff. I kept thinking, okay, this is going well. I wasn't thinking about red flags yet. I was just trying to enjoy the night. But then small things started slipping in, like how he would lean just a little too close when laughing, or how his hand would hover over the table when mine moved. Little things, almost unnoticeable, but they left a prickling unease in the back of my mind. We left the cafe around 11, the streets dimly lit, wet from a drizzle that had started hours earlier. We walked together for a bit, talking about the evening, the conversation getting quieter as the night air pressed against us. Then we reached my car, parked a block away under a flickering streetlight. This is when things got weird. He asked for a hug before we parted ways, and at first I thought, okay, a quick hug, normal enough. I leaned in, thinking it would be over in a second, but he didn't pull back. At first, it was subtle, just a little longer than necessary. I shifted slightly, assuming he'd loosen his grip, but he didn't. I tried to step back gently, and he adjusted too, holding me closer. That's when the whisper started, soft, almost casual, telling me he felt a deep connection already. It wasn't threatening at first, just unnerving. The street was quiet, just the drizzle hitting the asphalt and the distant hum of traffic, but the world felt smaller somehow, compressed around this moment. I tried to pull back again, thinking maybe he would take the hint, but he didn't. The hug stretched on, and my stomach sank into that cold, creeping panic that grows when something is socially awkward but personally threatening. The connection he was talking about wasn't mutual, it was invasive. I felt my personal space collapse, like a physical weight pressing against me. Every attempt to step away was met with a subtle shift that kept me trapped, my discomfort ignored, even weaponized. Time slowed. What should have been a simple hug turned into this uncomfortable, endless hold. I started noticing the details around me, trying to distract myself. The slick wet sidewalk, the neon sign across the street flickering, a cat darting into an alley, but nothing could pull me out of the pressure of that moment. His whispering continued, soft words about connection and chemistry, phrases that would normally be sweet but now felt controlling, possessive, demanding acknowledgement. I realized then that I had to do more than shift or inch away. I tried twisting, stepping back more forcefully, moving my hands to my own sides to create space. He tightened slightly, leaning in as if to reinforce the hug, and that's when the panic really hit. The physicality of it, the inability to escape, mixed with the casual tone of his words, made my skin crawl. It was one of those moments where you feel trapped in your own politeness, your own hesitation to offend someone, but every second stretched painfully. I remember noticing my hands pressing against his chest, feeling the rhythm of his heartbeat, the texture of his jacket, and realizing I had never felt more aware of someone else's presence in such a personal space. It wasn't affection, it wasn't closeness, it was control. A simple social gesture turned into a psychological cage. I wanted to scream, to push away, but I didn't because the street was dark, barely a soul around, and the thought of escalation made my chest tighten further. Finally, after what felt like eternity, he loosened his grip slightly, enough to give me some breathing room. I stepped back fully, my heart hammering, my legs weak. He smiled, still talking softly about this deep connection that I apparently shared with him, but I couldn't focus on the words anymore. I felt a mix of shock, confusion, and lingering fear. The walk from the cafe to my car, which had taken maybe 10 minutes, now felt like a trap I couldn't shake. A sequence that had stretched and twisted until the hug became a symbol of something wrong and invasive. I got into my car shaking, fumbling with my keys, trying to process what just happened. It wasn't the hug itself, it was the insistence, the refusal to acknowledge my signals, the way he tried to convince me with words that the closeness I didn't consent to was something mutual and meaningful. It was the distortion of a normal social interaction into an uncomfortable, manipulative act. I sat there for a long time, staring at the wet asphalt, listening to the drizzle, trying to calm my racing thoughts. Later, replaying the night in my mind, I realized how many subtle things led to that moment: the leaning too close at the cafe, the hovering hands, the soft, controlling talk, the way he interpreted normal social behavior as permission. It was the puzzle falling into place, and the hug was the final piece that made the whole image terrifying. It wasn't aggression, it wasn't violence. It was boundary violation, subtle but undeniable. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that flickering streetlight, felt the weight of his arms, heard the whisper about connection. The worst part was the casualness, the normalization of behavior that should have been obvious as inappropriate. It stuck with me not because of dramatic confrontation, but because of the quiet horror of someone assuming intimacy without consent and then verbalizing it as affection. Thinking about it now, the hug represents the slow, insidious creep of discomfort that can happen in normal social settings. It was quick, it was subtle, and yet it left a lasting mark because of how easily a gesture can be twisted into something controlling. The night started like any other, with casual conversation and rooftop lights, and ended with me trapped in a hug that didn't respect my boundaries, a whisper of connection that I didn't feel, and a lingering sense of violation that was quiet but real. I never saw him again, and yet the memory sticks, not because of what he did overtly, but because of the control implied in a simple gesture that became a slow, lasting horror. I can still feel that grip, the whispered words, the streetlight above, and the quiet panic of realizing that politeness and social expectation can trap you in moments you never signed up for. It was a date that seemed normal until it wasn't, a hug that seemed harmless until it became the opposite, and a night that ended with me aware of how small and trapped you can feel when someone refuses to respect boundaries.